you know, for 20 years, 25 years maybe. And
right.
then it's like everything needs attention. And it's so expensive to do most of this stuff. You know, it's not like putting on a coat of paint.
Right.
If you don't want to be constantly swarmed by beautiful women, then don't watch this ad.
Struggling with your dating game? Well, that
Live to the Kings.
Good morning, King Kayfabers. Welcome, welcome.
Just going to email us the link real quick. We got a new King Kayfaber, Caleb R. this morning.
Oh man, hope he's in here already.
Caleb shows up and gets to experience the goodness. Alright, that link should do the trick.
You know, most of my collection is in, well, magazines and comics in pretty good order. I usually put my hands on those.
Yeah.
Books and mini comics, just chaos.
Right.
And it makes me want to see that dude's mini comic that did that Barbarian comic. And it's like, I just can't put my hands on. Like, a mini comic is so needle in the haystack.
Yeah.
It's I must have 20 boxes of
one.
minis.
Yeah.
You know, it's like.
All right, people show up, man. West Coast Dave, what's up? Oh, Caleb R. Yeah.
Awesome.
Welcome to the new King Kayfaber, man. Caleb R., if you were here, we would pull out the swords, pause, and put them on your shoulder. Pause. So, guys, let's make the announcement right now, man. The intended shoot interview guest today, Alex Ross, motherfuckers.
Yeah, let us know if there's stuff you want to know about him.
They said happy birthday, Caleb.
King Caleb.
Yeah, Alex Ross is going to be on the hook today. So around 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time is when we have that thing scheduled. Jimmy, I'm going to whiz right quick.
Yeah, man.
And
Don't forget to take the lapel mic off.
Yeah, right.
Hey, do we need, is that a...
No, we don't need anything with that. That's from my phone. Remember, shaking it more than twice is spanking it.
Yeah, looking forward to talking with Alex Ross and getting some of his perspective on here. I was surprised when we talked to Paul Pope and he said that you know, Alex Ross, Chris Ware, those guys were part of that group, you know, the class of '94 or whatever it was. So I'll be curious to get into that a little bit. I was not a big Alex Ross fan in the '90s, but looking back on his work now, I've come to really appreciate it. And part of it is the contrast with everything, and it's contrast with the Rob Liefeld, Jim Lee image style, but it's also contrast with like Dark Knight, Watchmen, grim and gritty style. And it's not retro looking, the art, at least not to comics. Alex Ross, it's so interesting like where he fits, because it's anti-image, it's anti-grim and gritty, and it's not a house style. You know, like I think it's nostalgic content, but it's not nostalgic in the sense of, oh, he's really channeling John Romita.
Well, I mean, he's channeling like Norman Rockwell. That's
right, but that's pretty. But it's fresh in comics.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, it's pretty. It's quite a career.
I'm gonna pull up the.
Definitely not like anybody else's in comics. And you know, like anybody who is good and does something. So many imitations. Remember, Marvel would have all those painted books that were like $6.
Oh yeah,
and they were they were mostly so bad because like, where are you going to find somebody else who's good at painting?
Right. With that sort of reverence and stuff, man. Because like, yeah, certainly, most of that stuff did not.
That said, I still want that Tex Spider-Man painted comic that I've never seen.
Right. Yeah,
I think it exists though. I think it exists. I've looked it up on like my comic shop and it's listed.
Does he do the whole thing or just pages?
I think he does the whole thing. I think it's like it may be one of those Alex Ross, like, hey, we can sell deluxe painted books.
Right.
It might be in that kind of window. But you'd see him paint stuff now and then. I forget who.
Tex,
Yeah,
yeah, because he comes from continuity.
Who we talked to, and it's like, where's the Tex masterpiece? And it's like weirdly, it's Ghost Rider and Punisher. It's like the monthly stuff that he was doing would be his best stuff. I wonder how many other people that probably fits. That's another guy whose style-wise is pretty different than everybody else at that time. But the fact that like his best comics are the monthly grind comics, that's throwback. That's the old school. You know, if you're gonna find like John Romita or John Buscema or any of those dudes, like it's probably an issue of some monthly book they were drawing.
Right. Yeah, but that's a tragedy because he's there, you know.
That's right. Like other people were doing their creator-owned books,
And it's not like he's dead. You know, he can still do it. He's just. Does he have the fastball still?
His stuff's evolved. You know, like that's some of it too. I like his pen and ink. I like his painting okay, but his pen and ink is the stuff that really was like, wow, man, that guy's doing something nobody else is doing.
Absolutely.
But I don't know the book that, you know, it's weird to be like, here, check out Ghost Rider 18.
With that said, when we do Deadpool, I want you to like look at these pages and shit like a hawk, because I didn't pull the Tex Ghost Riders, but like this dude definitely stole from. I think maybe it's like the corner box drawing, or it's an exact text piece that was used on the Marvel shirts.
I read this book before I went through the articles, you know, the swipe references and stuff. And after you see like a couple, because I can't place them, but it's just like, wow, that looks familiar. That looks familiar. And then I went through the article and it's like, okay, yeah, it's most of the stuff that I pointed at.
I found
but
more.
It also becomes like over. Right. I'm sure it's loaded.
Yeah, and then another part of the conversation I want to have is like how it calls everything into question. So you might draw something great, and we'll just automatically assume that you didn't. You know, that you took it from somewhere. Because there's definitely Joe Mad swipes that I didn't. I just don't know his work as well, but I know that's like, man, I know that's Joe Mad. It's going to be a good conversation. So did you tell people what we're fucking with?
First up, John Byrne, writing and drawing Fantastic Four. Did you know Sienkiewicz did a 12-month stint on Fantastic Four?
Yeah, I got a couple of that. It's
Joe
not,
Sinnott
it's not
inking.
good. Yeah.
Yeah, it's weird.
It's did you see it?
I have them all.
Yeah, like it's his Neil Adams wannabe shit.
It's
that phase.
Yeah, it's I guess just disappointing. You know, I hold him in such high esteem, and it's not special.
Yeah, you know, like you gotta get in the door. Like that was always the rule. Is like.
Do you know if he did it after Moon Knight, before Moon Knight, or during Moon Knight?
It's before.
Yeah, so it's before he really becomes him.
Totally, because like you see the evolution in Moon Knight, and that's in the 80s. Like I think those books are in the 70s. I think the way it works, Byrne did like a couple issues in the 70s, and then Sienkiewicz pops on for a year, and then it's like, I don't know, Keith Pollard or something. Ready when you are.
Hit it. Hello and welcome to your favorite YouTube channel, Cartoonist Kayfabe. My name is Jim Rugg.
I'm Ed Piscor.
We are looking at John Byrne's first issue as writer-artist of Fantastic Four. That is Fantastic Four 232 from 1981. Before we open this book up, I want to remind everybody we are a daily comic book YouTube channel with over 1,700 videos in our catalog that you can search from the Cartoonist Kayfabe YouTube homepage. Search by artist, search by character, search by comic book title. I'm sure you'll find something there you love. Also want to let everybody know we do have a Patreon. It's part of the way we keep the lights on at the Cartoonist Kayfabe recording studio. There are 3 different levels there. At the King Kayfaber level, you get to sit in on the live recording sessions, which means you get access to all of our videos before anyone else. If you find a book you want to add to your collection, you'll be the first one tracking it down. That can save you money, and in some cases, that can save you a copy, because if some of this stuff is rare, it disappears completely, and it can become very difficult to add to your collection. So the Patreon link is below this video, and we appreciate your support there. All right, Ed. John Byrne, height of his powers, probably at this point. He had been drawing X-Men, probably elevated X-Men considerably from a book that was on the rise before he takes over to probably the hottest book on the market whenever he actually leaves. He leaves, and they even mention it in the back. Jim Shooter writes a page or two, his height page about John Byrne coming on board here. And part of the reason is creative differences, man. He wants more input on writing stories, and Chris Claremont's not going anywhere. So if you want to write your own stuff, you're going to have to leave. And Jim Shooter and Marvel offer him Fantastic Four, and this is the result. So I think he does 5 years or so on Fantastic Four. Basically, up until he leaves to go do Superman in 1986, he does Fantastic Four, a very, very highly regarded run on Fantastic Four, often compared in quality to the initial Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, in terms of, if it's not the best run, it's usually regarded as the second best. One of the top 2 runs in Fantastic Four history, and why not? Like, he's there a long time, brings through all kinds of cool ideas and characters, and his art, we often say the fastball, boy, it looks sharp.
He still has it.
Yeah, I mean, he might be at the peak of this. This is Nolan Ryan era fastball for John Byrne.
Yeah, it's fantastic. These are comics that I was able to piece together a substantial run on. So they must have been pretty popular as they were coming out. Because I remember, man, I might have a couple of these Diablo issues here that I got for 40 cents or something at that Bill and Waltz. The thing that this sort of affectation of like supervillains in pop culture, where like they create their GI Joes of the protagonist, has always been funny to me. Man. It's Dark Helmet in Spaceballs. It's Destro in Silent Interlude, I believe. He has his little
you often see it on
figures.
The chessboard, right? We're gonna move these characters around.
Yeah,
yeah. It's a clunky metaphor, a cliche metaphor maybe at this point, but it does offer fun visuals. You see this little play on words here on the inks. Bjorn Hain, obviously John Byrne there on inks, and right away you see some of that hitting pay dirt with like some of the textures on like the cauldron and the candlesticks. Byrne really is like pulling out all the stops, and why wouldn't you? Like, this is a big deal. Makes me wonder, like, you talk about having multiple copies of this. I have no trouble finding this. This was a series that I put together very cheaply. I'm sure I didn't pay more than $1 for a book, and I think I paid $0.25 for quite a few of them.
Yeah, right.
It makes me wonder, if you're Jim Shooter and Marvel in the age of newsstands, do you go, hey man, we got a hot artist taking over Fantastic Four, let's bump up that print run 50,000 or 100,000? Because how do you know for newsstand sales how many to print? So I wonder if this is something where it was like, we're goosing this. There are going to be a bunch more Fantastic Four 232s than 231s out there.
It's interesting that you bring that up, because I've heard Jim Shooter talk about this a bunch. You can find some good, very long, meaty interviews with him on the tubes, and it actually goes the other direction. The newsstand is random, but it's the direct market people who are the hip people who follow artists and who follow careers and stuff and are up on news. So yeah, maybe you bumped up the numbers for the direct market as opposed to the newsstand. You see what I'm saying? Because that's where the hip people would be. And when we talk about the fastball, it would be this stuff that gets blunted and dulled when he's in the 90s and really kind of churning out a ton of stuff. I think a big piece of this book, you can keep going.
Well, you know what? One last piece on this splash. Back to the basics. I think this was very successful. Byrne does it for 5 years. Clearly it's successful for him. This back to the basics is something you would hear him say when he'd take over a new book.
Right.
Like this became almost the trademark of like, we're going to bring Byrne in to, juice up whatever Superman, Wonder Woman, whatever these books were. And this concept of like, he loved these characters in a way that like a fan loves them.
It's a nostalgia vibe.
And so a lot of his practices, I feel like, became defined by this. And I don't know if it's because, hey, this is successful, this is my formula, or if that was the formula from the get-go of like, I want these characters the way they were when I loved them.
Yeah.
So maybe it's just something, chicken or egg.
I think it's more the latter than the former, because you see him do enough talking and stuff, and he's very steeped in Stan and Jack. But he'll do a little bit of updates, right? Like he'll give her this Karen haircut, which is completely unflattering as far as I'm concerned, but she becomes the Invisible Woman. Just like very little things, which I think the comic book audience is probably suited for. Like very, very minor change. You got to slip it to them because they're so finicky and loud and whatever.
This is fun in the sense that it'd be like people changing a costume or something. It's like, there's a new guy here, so I gotta put my own spin on this stuff.
Right.
And you think like, who cares about a haircut? And especially like, it ages. We're looking at this thing 40 plus years later, and it's like, oh yeah.
Yeah, she had the same hair. Well, the one prior to this is the Stan hair. I mean, the Jack Kirby haircut. So he's making all these little minor tweaks to just kind of bring it into the 80s a little bit. But the overall comic, the overall story, it's a one and doneer.
Yeah.
That is a complete arc. It man, I bet you if you laid it next to a good Stan and Jack issue, it follows the exact formula of like 2 pages Invisible Girl, 2 pages Human Torch, like split everybody up. 2 pages this person, 2 pages this person, 2 pages this person. Let's get them back together for 5 pages.
That's
and then,
it.
And then have our exit.
Right. Yeah. It really is that thing. Individually, they're out being their own characters, but in order to survive, they got to be the 4. And that's exactly what's in here. I was looking at this as being just interesting drawing, but also the textures that Byrne is bringing in. There was white screen on the previous page, a little bit like looking through the window.
Yeah.
A little bit of white zipatone.
That's one of those bad glass shatters where none of the shards overlap.
Don't overlap. I didn't even notice
That's
that.
a pet peeve to me.
Yes, I know. It's come up. All right, so we did a couple pages, to your point, with the Invisible Woman. Now here we are. Let's go see what the Thing and the Human Torch are up to.
Yeah, classic tongue-in-cheek comics. I think it's one of the things where it's a good strategy to a certain... When comics are still on a newsstand, accessible to children, I think that this was a very smart strategy for him to employ, man, because we're getting the whole, like, Jim Shooter treatment where we're getting introduced to everybody and their analogs. So we have, the chicks that are going to be part of, like, our supporting cast and stuff. He's really, it's good children's comics.
These are the good notes to take if you're trying to make comics out there. Is like, you just got to show a little bit of the building to make the city.
Right.
Like the first time you're drawing and it's like, I got to fill this with 3-point perspective buildings in the background.
But don't have your character
That's
leaning on a
Looks
rooftop.
like he's doing some kind of gymnastics over the top of that fake building set, that miniature building set that he's
kaiju.
walked through.
Yeah, the Godzilla movie set.
Elephant Man playing there. Give us a certain time period.
A little bit of Lynch.
Some of the detail, like the very fine lines of rain and stuff, and really even like crowds and stuff in the backgrounds, almost makes me think like you would draw this 2 up or something to get this amount of information on a page. I know he didn't.
He's nuts, man.
But to get that amount of information on there. Also, he's using a fine line, which goes away, like with a lot of his work in the 90s, that falls apart. I am in love with this panel.
Sure.
There's, I think, a screen tone, like an organic splatter on some of the foreground elements, but all those fine lines, again, to do... It's Kirby tech without Kirby. It's a different version of Kirby tech, but really capturing that.
There's a way to point out the importance of this to John Byrne, and we have a video up. If you type in just John Byrne's name, we took a look at one of his initial submissions to Marvel. It was a 22-page Fantastic Four comic done in like 1971 or something. It just has for fun, as a submission. So he's steeped in this. Like, he is in hog heaven, as my pops would say.
You know what? That's a great counterpoint video to this one, too, because you see a guy who obviously loves this stuff for, his life, doesn't get the job then, goes and becomes a really good comic book artist, and now he's back. So it's almost like the second first meeting of John Byrne and Fantastic Four. And to compare and contrast those two, man, his skills grew.
That is like... Shouts to Jim Novak or Novik for doing the lettering here, because it's a verbose issue. Like, once we get a little bit deeper, there's a lot of words on the page, and you could tell that the Ames guide had to be set smaller. But stuff like this, I mean, we are going back to Artie Simek, classic Marvel era with this kind of material.
And it adds so much to that panel composition.
I think
it's
so.
a big chunk of it, and you would lose it with that kind of like mechanical, vector drawn. Here it's part of the artwork. It's part of the coolness of the panel. Yeah, and as you say, the story is there's 4 different kind of elementals that are coming after the Fantastic Four, and they're designed to not be like fire versus fire.
Right.
So here we have the fire guy fighting Reed Richards, who turns into a ball and just bounces away.
You got to do that, man. Like, I would like to see the ball different shapes, because it's the same size Reed Richards' head.
Yeah.
The entire time, and certainly when it's coming forward, like, you could use all that real estate to really make it feel that way.
Yeah, definitely. And this to me isn't great, but you're trying stuff. And some of it's relying on coloring to deliver that.
And I think if you saw the original, there might be a story to tell there.
That's true. Boy, he looks good here. Reed Richards, spreading out to fly.
It's a great character when you're tasked with using your imagination to get him to do stuff.
Even I find this stuff fun of physical characterization where he's like pulling his arm back in, trying to make the stretch go away or whatever. But he was pretty far out there, so it takes a little bit. You know what? A showcase of Reed Richards across this spread where you get to see him in a variety of how can you stretch this guy out.
If you're gonna call yourself Mr. Fantastic, you better show and prove.
Yes. Yeah, I wonder if some of the writers don't like him versus, like, I think Byrne is showing that he likes him in here, you know? He's showing him off.
He's the big dog.
But I imagine some people come in and they're like, this guy's dumb. He just stretches. He's an egghead. Hey, this feels like a throwback, a reference shot to the early Human Torch stuff. I don't know if that's actually a lift, but it definitely reminds me of some of those early, I guess, Carl Burgos?
Carl Burgos. And the original... Kirby, like, it took Kirby a while to come up with this guy, and this is pretty close to what Kirby was doing the first chunk of issues.
Boy, Byrne is good too with balancing of the different figures in a composition. You know, whether it's 2 figures that kind of fit nicely, 3 figures, really good at the superhero comics. I like this monster guy too a lot, and I love this drawing of him where, like, we see that back arm and it pops, you know, it's a different texture, it's a different value treatment than our foreground of the 2 arms that are kind of overlapping. I enjoy seeing Byrne, like, stretch his drawing out, because I do think by the 90s, when I was reading him kind of in real time, he wasn't exploring as much in the drawing side of it.
Right, he had his stuff codified, it was just kind of reaching into the bag of tricks.
But this part feels like he's competing maybe with Chris Claremont and X-Men and, you know, the book he left. Yeah,
Frank Miller was his nemesis.
Absolutely.
And this is an interesting piece because the Invisible Girl was damsel in distress. I mean, you can find interviews with Stan Lee talking about as much, where she's almost the Lois Lane. You put her in peril and the other guys have to save her. So this is Byrne giving her some agency and coming up with some things for the girl to do. Give her some powers.
Yeah, from the very first issue, this is kind of a new use of that power.
Yeah.
So, you know, making her stronger from issue number 1. And there's some great moments of it, you know, like just the force filled with that earth elemental monster around, you know, like blowing the pieces off. But, you know, to your point of the glass shards, again, they're not overlapping.
Yeah, it just
it's very graphically neat.
Dookies.
Yes. Thing is dying here because he has no air. He's surrounded by water.
For pages.
I think this could actually be presented in some way more effectively.
Right.
You know, like, I don't get the sense of, like, the world's closing in, the edges are getting black, you know, from lack of oxygen, and I think that maybe could have been done in some way a little more effectively.
Sure.
It's funny that he finds, like, the
goes to the scuba shop.
Right, exactly.
I guess it's New York.
I only have seconds of lung left, but I have enough time to go into scuba shop. And kind of insidious, that creature then switches to the woman that's working there. And to me, that is more effective. Like,
yeah,
she looks like she's in trouble.
Totally.
And you get 2 of the Fantastic Four starting now to work together and work together effectively.
With her lopsided head. I hate her haircut. You know what it is, man? I got yelled at by enough teachers that had that fucking Karen haircut that I don't feel good about it.
This stuff feels so much like
classic comics.
We're aiming at 8-year-olds.
Yeah,
you know,
classic material.
You busted up that earth creature, and now guess what? It reforms as a giant fist. Like, it's so easy to understand it. In a weird way, this is your Marvel submission guide of, like, you should be able to just look at the pictures and know what's going on. Like, that sums that up totally to me.
Yeah, for sure. And that's Byrne comics. There's no subtext. It's all kind of like on the surface level, cause and effect imagery.
If I'm John Byrne, the artist, I am pissed off at John Byrne, the writer, whenever it's time for Mr. Fantastic to fight Wind.
Right.
That seems like a nightmare. Does a good job with it.
See, I thought you were going to say I'm pissed off at the writer telling me I have to put this vehicle into a damn panel.
I wouldn't love that either, but I bet you that's coming out of... there's some reference there. You know, something in the morgue file. You know, I'd be curious about morgue files, too. As we talk to, like, some of these older guys, like, getting info on that is something I'm curious about. And I wonder if a guy like Byrne has a great system. Because SVA forever has in their library like a morgue, like a gigantic morgue file. You basically just go there and search images.
Right.
And I wonder if some of these guys were better at that than others.
There was that library at the Kubert School, and you always read, man, like part of your gig is clipping reference. And I asked enough dudes on the channel, John Romita Jr. and stuff, like, you built up this reference library throughout, say 20 years of your career, and then the internet happens. Spiritually, I feel like you can't even throw that stuff away. Like, you just have to keep it.
Right.
Investing all that time into it. You know what we used to call him? Because that's Tor.
Okay.
Torzan.
Tarzan. That's good. That's great. I linger here because this is still the ad that's running in the 90s. Over a decade later, whenever I'm looking at schools and thinking about this stuff, it's still the same piece of ad art.
And one of my greatest kind of victories is, like, I think it might be on the first or second issue, my X-Men Grand Design is updated ad. And, after they start to spit out some talent, like, that's a selling mechanism. And, like, Eddie P's name is on there. And that was huge.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that was huge for me.
That is awesome.
Fire versus fire.
Team is all together. Boy, he draws Human Torch well.
Because it's just a figure, and he's good at drawing the basic human form and twisting it up, and he knows what to do, man.
It's so interesting of this time period where, like, you have to be able to draw. It's superheroes. You got to be able to draw flying figures. And there's probably 4 or 5 poses that sort of, like, you do some variations. You could imagine arms out in this one, so it's basically the same figure. And it's like that's what you would need to come armed with if what you're doing is like a superhero comic.
Always when you're making comics, and there was times where I was tasked with a certain, like in X-Men Grand Design, right, where you use a black outline for flames, and it just feels wrong. I think Frank Miller or Klaus would have probably surprinted that stuff. We've seen versions where they would do that sort of thing. Have a red color hold with those lines.
I always wonder, because this line is super, super fine.
Right.
To the point that it drops out in the printing a little bit. Same with the wind, like some of the wind effect. Is this the Flexa printing? Are we at that stage
I
yet?
don't think so.
Because the dots aren't quite that big.
Yeah, and like the lines this thick, you would see a uniform wobble across a bunch of them. Like a little noodle across a bunch.
It is interesting because I do think there's production stuff here that, and I don't know, maybe that's why Byrne gets to a heavier line too.
Right.
is something that he would learn from seeing it in print. But it is interesting to see some of the stuff, and it's almost like, man, from the original to the printed page, a lot of difference.
Yeah, maybe.
Look at that robot design.
Generic as fuck.
The human computer.
There's on my Instagram Explore page, there's this guy in New York who's his whole gimmick is he does like a Knight Rider turn on like a dirt bike, and he's got a microwave on his head, and then he opens the microwave door to the camera and like gives you like a little factoid or like a little piece of spiritual information, a little fortune cookie talk, and then puts the door back on and just speeds off.
Jeez.
It's the new era, man.
Yeah, I guess so. Pretty clever with the torch. Beats this flame guy by sucking up all the oxygen, going like supernova, but it leaves him in bad shape. But he can't just free fall because you die from that height.
Yeah.
So a little bit of flame just to slow the descent enough that he can hit that water and not
little Mars
splatter.
rover kind of sputter.
That haircut is tough from behind.
So stupid. It's terrible. And Byrne's a hard worker. I feel like he wasn't seeing too many chick hairstyles or something.
All right, are basically the end. Fantastic Four have gotten out of peril, but there's one loose end. Who sent these guys?
Right.
Let's go talk to Doctor Strange and figure that out. And I think that's another piece where Byrne the fan, you get to play in the universe. Like all these characters, one of the cool parts of Marvel is that it was the universe, and you would get these kinds of like bump into each other. It's not necessarily a crossover, but hey, we're in the same city.
Right.
And we're trying to track down this mystical thing. I know a guy who can do it.
I don't know if this is the first comic that Byrne wrote, but it does have a little bit of that quality of abruptly ending it, like trying to like race to the ending to kind of tie it up with the Diablo thing by just kind of like shoehorning this page in here. It's pretty contrived.
It is, because ultimately he's like, you can't connect me to those guys, and they're like, no, but look at this stolen artifacts in your bag. You can do some years for stolen property. And it makes me think Jim Shooter. Right. That feels like something where it's like there's, I hate to say real world logic applied here, but it's kind of like you can apply some logic here and make this epilogue happen.
Like, even with a kid's story, like Chekhov's gun is a real thing, like why read anything if there isn't some setup and some kind of consequence or way to solve the problem? It's hack writing to just say, aha, I know who did it after, getting my memory jogged, or so. Like that's the hackiest of hack writing. And that's sort of here in a way.
So I mentioned in the beginning, this is Jim Shooter giving his bulletin announcements talking about why did John Byrne leave X-Men? After years of drawing it, he wanted to write. And so that's what this is, pretty much playing nice, and announces that Dave Cockrum is coming back to the X-Men.
Right.
And then the other thing that I want to point out is, if you see what the Mighty Marvel checklist, Daredevil 172, to give everybody kind of a time frame of where's Frank Miller at this point. He's hot. I think he takes over writing Daredevil with 168, so he's just coming on as writer/artist, and still has, up to issue 191 that he'll be around Daredevil. So another almost 2 years of Frank Miller will be on Daredevil as of Byrne taking over Fantastic Four here. So it's interesting to me to see these timelines. And, after you get past John Byrne, Frank Miller, I don't know who you point to and say, like, that's the number 3 superstar. Maybe George Perez. It's not
Marvel or all of comics.
Well, I think Marvel, DC. Like the superhero comic stuff. But those two were just Byrne and Miller. Like when I think of this time period, early '80s, like
Sure.
they just seem so hot compared to almost everybody else I can think of. And again, off the top of my head, Perez is the other guy I would think of that might be in that conversation.
Sure.
But these two, as writing their own comics, they're celebrated as writers at this point. And not everybody that tries to write their own comics makes it to that point.
Right. But I do encourage it.
Absolutely.
I absolutely love reading that kind of stuff far more than just a good jobber written comic.
I wonder, I read this in hindsight, right? I didn't read this in 1981.
Right.
I wonder how much this reads like kind of what everybody else is writing, like the guys who are just writing comics, because it feels like this is kind of like that.
Right.
Miller's Daredevil run to me feels a little bit different than most of the writing.
Totally, absolutely.
But this feels like kind of by the books in terms of writing. Like you could put somebody else on here as an artist and it would sort of still make sense.
Totally. There's a brevity to Miller's writing where it seems like what Stan Lee established is if you find some space, put in some words, and Byrne is in that camp for sure. So he's keeping that alive. There's definitely differences, and we talked about it plenty of times. Like Miller really is, and he's shown and proven that he has advanced the form. He's gotten a platform, and he advances the form, and never settles to the point of like intense abstraction. To the nowadays he pisses people off. Everything he draws makes people upset, which to me that's. They're not just saying whatever,
Right.
There's people who love it. There's people who fucking hate it. And Byrne kind of like we said, like he developed a bag of tricks, stuck with the bag of tricks. Good to go?
Yes. The question to put out there to people is like, what are the best Byrne Fantastic Four issues? Like that'd be something I'd be curious to. And King Kayfaber's man, weigh in the comments. Because that's something I'd be curious to look into.
Somebody said bring up the Terminator Burning Earth stuff to Alex Ross, and I definitely have some stuff where that is concerned that I want to bring up because I don't think he paints. I think I saw something that he uses Prismacolor pencils.
Oh wow!
Yeah, I mean Prismacolor pencils on a colored paper to kind of cheat it.
Man, I had no idea, and I think I have some of those issues. I didn't even pull them out this week to look at. In my head, they're painted, but I guess not.
Yeah, no, I mean, like if he wouldn't have told you, you wouldn't know. I'm just looking real quick for I know I pulled my Gambits for a future episode, and I got mine signed by the man. So.
Yeah, the other Gambit thing that I thought about, there was a Wolverine Gambit Tim Cell series. And it would have been early, like I think it's before Batman Long Halloween. But it would have been like, Gambit's hot, Wolverine's hot. But I don't think Tim Cell was the guy yet. It's right. Identifiable as Tim Cell. I think it's probably after Deathblow. And I think I have some of it.
In Ed Piskor fashion, my issue 1 is with a bunch of other issue 1s, but I got all these guys signed.
He's doing the gold the gold pen too.
This was the time when he had those pages for sale for like $300.
That seems about right.
That's the one that I pulled off the newsstand. Like the series is already coming off, and like that's one that I got off of.
Man, I thought I had all this,
Kmart.
and I do not remember this cover at
Is
all,
that
which
dope?
means I don't have it. That's what it's code for, and that's weird because I definitely have like this one. That's so funny.
Yeah, that's the one, dude. That I have another version of that I got like from Kmart that is so dog-eared.
It really makes me wonder if I got rid of them and rebought them, or if this is like where I cut off.
Right.
You know, because like I just left. I left X-Men at like issue 6 or something. You know
So
what
funny,
I mean?
because in a way this is me coming back, in a way.
Yeah.
But I'm still, I'm 11 years old. We'll just trust that it's clear. Good if you are.
Yeah, hit it. Hello and welcome to your favorite YouTube channel, Cartoonist Kayfabe. My name is Jim Rugg.
I'm at Piscor.
We are going to be looking at Gambit #1 from 1994 today. Before we open that one up, I want to let everybody know we're a daily comic book YouTube channel. We've been doing this for over 5 years, which means 1,700 videos in our back catalog that you can search on the Cartoonist Kayfabe YouTube homepage. Search by creator, character, book title. You will find something that you love, if you love comics. I also want to remind everybody we have a Cartoonist Kayfabe Patreon that helps keep the lights on in the recording studio here. You can get to that from the link below this video. You can join as a King Kayfaber and sit in on the recording session. That'll give you access to all of our videos first, even before we edit and release them. And if you see something you want, you'll be the first one in line to get it. You'll beat the Kayfabe effect. If it's something rare, you'll get it before it disappears or before it goes up in price. So check out that link. We appreciate all of our Patreon support. And with that said, Ed, let's dive into this Lee Weeks early masterpiece. Maybe not quite a masterpiece,
of drawing.
but Lee Weeks is awesome, and I think his stuff is well on display at this point. I think he had been doing Daredevil before this,
Right.
And did these elongated figures. I like whenever the artist has different body types for the
Sure.
figures.
Yeah.
And Gambit is a lean, tall guy in my head. Lee Weeks nails that.
Right.
And his costume, I think, accentuates it. So we're going to enjoy going through that. But we have all 4 issues here. 3 of them are yours, Ed, and those are all signed because you've talked about meeting Lee Weeks at the Pittsburgh Comic-Con in the past and some influence there, ability to look at his original pages.
Oh yeah, man! Like he had these pages for sale, and I was a mark for this series, for sure. So I sort of had the intention. I'm like, I went to a convention once before that convention, and it was Ernie Steiner, and Ernie Steiner was selling pages for like $5.
Yes.
Like he was selling pages for nothing. So in my mind, that's what original art costs. And I got my Superman comic signed by Ron Frenz right next to Lee Weeks, and Ron Frenz had pages for like $1. There was like a $1 page section pile. There was a $5 per page pile. Then there was like a $20 per page pile. So I'm like, okay, man, I'm gonna definitely get a page from Gambit. Maybe I'll buy a cover. And I went to Lee Weeks, man, probably prepubescent, high-pitched voice and stuff. And Mr. Weeks, may I please buy some pages? And he looked at me and was like, I have nothing for sale less than $300. And then I actually thought that he was like a price gouger. I'm like, man, that's so fucked up. I mean, I didn't say that to him, but like in my mind, I'm just
right.
like, what a punk. His pages are so expensive.
That's funny.
This is the one I pulled off the racks, like when I first came across it, because I was not a comic shop dude whatsoever. Even though it says direct edition, maybe I got like a 4-pack or something, but I have a version where it's just a newsstand, and it was the most dog-eared, like fucked up thing at the Kmart.
You can see the early like desktop publishing elements here, where it's like, well,
skew.
let's stretch the logo out. Such a bad idea, and so many comics would do that. But I guess if you're experimenting with your new tools, go for it. But you can also see the gradations, like hard lines here on the way this gradation works, which was another tell of some of those early coloring softwares.
Right.
Makes
yeah.
me wonder what they're using here in 1994 to still get that. Because I know Dark Horse had I think they had proprietary software, or they had something, maybe Corel, that did not become the main.
Right, yeah, totally. And then there was the one that, like, the Steve Olaf one was like that CAD Barrett or COD Barrett, and that would have the banding, so maybe that's what that is. Definitely black in the mixture up here. One interesting thing about all these logos, like, these logos were established whenever they... I don't know that this logo was created for this, but at the beginning of the X-Men cartoon, when it shows all their names, like, this logo was there.
Interesting.
Yeah, and like the Beast logo from the 70s in, like, Adventures into Fear, like, that's the logo
That's
that shows
cool
up
they
on
used
the
that.
introduction.
I like that.
Yeah.
And also you can see the time period with the gold foil.
But yeah,
Add that onto the logo as well.
This is too little too late type shit, because I mean, it's 93. It's like 2 years past when that's really a thing.
Marvel was good for that in terms of, like, they continued using that for a while. You know,
definitely.
like probably into like 95 or something, where you'd be seeing like the expensive added on production piece, and it was like, and it might have worked. I don't know. I think people did buy that stuff because it was like, hey, look at that gimmick.
Totally. It was a long time. We were stoked, you know, in child years. I was 11 when this came out, when I scooped this up. So, you know, in 3 years since the character's introduction, might as well been a quarter of my lifetime or something, waiting for there to be a Gambit comic. And in terms of the art, fucking fantastic. But, like, what this comic is, it's such boilerplate for what a team character solo miniseries is.
Yeah.
And what I'm saying is, you have your character, like, with... You gotta goose it, right? So you gotta hot shot it and make it an X-Men comic first. And that's what you get. And then there has to be the reason to leave, is the typical boilerplate way of doing things. And that is what we have here. Introduce a threat. It's a unique threat to your main protagonist. And then he's got to handle it himself. So we've seen that a million times. It's corny. It's whack.
It's funny because it is, you know, it's personal issues. It's why you got to do it yourself. The classic wrestling, it should work. But yes, it is a cliche. And here's your creative team. Howard Mackey, who probably writing Ghost Rider still at that point. And Ghost Rider was such a hit. I feel like that's his, you know, that's his key to, like, he gets to write a bunch of stuff of this era. Klaus Janson on your inks. So if you have a young penciler, you know, Lee Weeks, couple years in the game, man, you put a great inker on top of him, and that's the formula for from an art standpoint.
It's interesting too, because, like, this might be the one that pulls Lee Weeks away from looking like just another really good QB, because the Daredevil stuff would have the QB-isms to it, the Joe Kubert style inking.
Do you remember who inked that?
Maybe it was even still Al Williamson.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering.
But I think he inked himself on covers. And he definitely did some really, really good G.I. Joe covers where I'm pretty sure he inked himself. But it was the QB organic ink treatment. And Klaus has an organic ink treatment, but it's his own thing. It's way different.
Boy, that Adventure Vision spent some money this issue.
Go back one real quick, because, like, this guy, there's an American Gladiators documentary on Netflix, and he was one of the original American Gladiators. I think his name was Malibu, and everybody clowns him because you know, he went away real fast, and they said that he was a pussy. Like, you could tell he wasn't going to make it, because before every impact he would fully, like, clench his eyes closed.
Oh, that's yeah, can't do that. His quads right there look giant.
Yeah, it's totally one of those Venice Beach, like, aesthetic guys that you scratch him and he'll start crying.
It's funny to think of, like, how hard you work for that body, and then, like, your hair is also that, like,
very moosed and manicured.
Wild hair.
Yeah.
And then it's funny whenever you turn the page and, like, this is what the characters look like.
Yeah, that's a representation. Like, this would be him right there.
But man, that's a lot of money. You know, that's
Sure.
inside front cover, and then six pages here in the middle. That's they're writing a check out for that. That looks cool. That creature.
Oh yeah, because it was a videotape that came with it. You could YouTube that and watch. It's pretty hokey, all in front of a green screen.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Because it's cheap, you know. It's made for video. Lee Weeks is a virtuoso of pacing out stories visually and choosing, like, the best camera angles to kind of sell you on the various moments and stuff.
It's very funny to me it's so natural of like, okay, he's lighting up his stogie, right? You get a couple heat to tip, light it up, and then sitting there smoking, but in full costume, even the mask.
Right.
That's some of my favorite stuff about superheroes now, and I don't know that that's supposed to be funny or
Right.
You know what I mean? Like the superhero in costume, but doing a normal mundane activity. It's my favorite part.
Pretty uninspired character. Just a cue ball head guy with a big old mustache. But like, look at that pose. You feel the weight. It really feels like he's stabilizing himself while he's jumping.
This stuff is very boilerplate, like the danger room sequence. You're just advancing, get us to the point where Gambit's going to go off on his own. It's one of those things that how you do that first issue is such a struggle. Like, how do you make it interesting? Because it is set up, except like this isn't much setup because we're going to just leave the danger room behind.
And
it's like 20 pages to get to the point of like, go start your adventure. Gambit.
Speaking toward like, a good writer setting stuff up, like Garth Ennis would do this kind of thing in Preacher. And Cassidy starts in New Orleans and he's away from the team, and like, how much do you need to set all that stuff up? Like, it's completely unnecessary. Another thing I will say about just Lee Weeks kind of jumping in with both feet to make this comic, so many dudes got the hair wrong, and when you get it wrong, it looks like Dan Barry Flash Gordon. It's very boring. I actually think Ernie Steiner is on the Dan Barry side of things because he did an annual, like a piece, and it was like too small and stuff.
I was going to say his hair is... I love his hair in this, and it is big.
Andy Kubert captures it well, and Lee Weeks did a good job because you have to abuse logic.
Sure, yeah.
In order to get it to come across. Like, you just have to...
Yeah, there's probably more outrageous examples as we go along, because I remember like thinking that this week and being like, wow, that is something, man. That's a pompadour there. Hey, look at the inking line for what's coming out of the back of these missiles. It's so...
That's a Klaus line,
is
man.
amazing.
That's a Klaus line, dude, for sure.
It's great stuff. But missiles in the danger room. How are they simulating that? Because that looks like there are explosions now happening.
Haptic bodysuits.
I think they've really damaged that room, possibly. These kind of poses of like faces turned at slightly different angles, plus expressions. No thanks.
This is Rogue, has blue balls. But then also, like, you already know you can't touch him, so why are you getting that frustrated that you can't, lick his nutsack or whatever? Great.
Gonna slice your throat with this card.
Dude.
Card as weapon.
We were on board, man. We were on board in a big way. Fantastic lighting on that piece, though. And then, as you could imagine, he recognizes the guy and all is forgiven. And then that's the guy who's going to bring word that you need to come. And there's some piece of information that Gambit just can't talk about with the regular X-Men. It's terrible. It's such shit. Like, elevated by Lee Weeks visually, but the writing is just egregiously crappy. You can write stuff for kids and it not be this boring, average, seen it 1,000 times type writing. Little hints of text to the way the synergy between Lee Weeks and Klaus Janson kind of interact. Little hairiness.
Yeah, there does. It is pretty interesting, those two together. It's because you see the little Jansenisms, but also like there's a lot of stuff that doesn't exactly feel like Jansen. Like he's really, I think he's giving some to Lee Weeks.
I think the underlying drawing that Lee Weeks can do, he is a fucking master, and he has never let up. Like, if you go on his Instagram, the dude is a ruler, man.
Yeah.
He is so solid.
A couple years ago, we saw him at Baltimore, and he was coming off of he won a whole bunch of the Ringo Awards there.
Oh, you know what that was for?
Was it Batman and something crossover?
Elmer Fudd. And then we went home and we're like, yeah, we got to check out this fucking comic. And then we did, and we're like, you know what? Fuck everybody who votes this horseshit.
The art was impressive, but I think that was all digital art too, like all the line art on that, if I remember correctly. But yes, to your point, the guy can draw.
Doesn't that look straight out of like the Damonites or like some kind of Wildcats comic?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it looks like Grifter. It looked like Grifter. When I was reading it, I thought that too.
We're gonna get Gideon over.
Are we? We're gonna try. I don't know if it works or not. I don't feel like Gideon is over, so I don't know. May not have worked. I love this point of view. The low angle shot, the foreground figures running away. Good stuff. This was also a piece that I never think of in comics, but you would see it in a lot of Marvel comics, and it's just like something is happening, but it's it's an energy burst or
Very
it's a bullet
90s.
or something.
That's
And
a 90s panel.
it's so bizarre because those panels exist in a lot of comics, and I just never really think about them.
Yeah, look at the size of that hair.
That's good hair. That's probably one of the ones I was thinking of, and it helps that he's silhouetted with that light blue behind the hair. Like, that is big hair. I'm on board.
Great angle, and it only gets bigger in these other issues, by the way. Great hair, and you see that little like white to the eyes.
Yeah.
People started to crib that, and Jim Lee did that early on, and I think some of those, like, whenever Gambit was introduced, he's created by Jim Lee, right? But I think the cover for that is drawn by Andy Kubert, and I think the interior is by somebody else. So
I think that's right, yeah.
And the guy who did the interior, I think he did those kind of like black sockets with a little white dot in the middle.
Yeah, I was going to comment on that. There's a close-up of his eyeballs back here, and you see that they're black with, like, an iris. Like the iris is your color piece. I kind of like how that looks.
Oh yeah,
it's
no,
pretty neat looking.
That's in the cartoon and everything. Like, there are those guys. I don't know if you've ever seen them. That like
Full Moon Zine. I really should do that.
from like San Quentin or something. They tattooed their eyeballs. You seen that shit?
Yeah, that doesn't always end well.
Yeah, that's what that looks like though.
That seems like the worst idea I've ever heard.
But very intimidating. Like, those dudes
would
are
be
not going to get
intimidating.
ass raped.
I guess.
They're going to be
Boy,
the
if
givers.
those are the two choices,
They're going to be the givers.
that is tough. Lesser of two evils, I suppose.
You see how big the hair gets by issue 4?
That's awesome. Well, hey, man, it's the action of the story. He hasn't had time for a haircut.
It's true.
It's going to keep growing. I also see some parallels with, like, Silvestri and Dan Green on Wolverine around
Yes.
this time period.
Yes.
Or I guess that would have been a couple years before this.
Totally before, yeah. The art, because, like, I mean, this is a sweet spot for me, and it was definitely Adam Kubert was on Wolverine at the time.
It's that era, too, where, like, give me an alternative to Jim Lee, Rob Liefeld. Nothing against them, but I don't want everybody drawing like them. And so, like, this is an example of what I would say is an alternative. And I think that's partially Klaus Janson, because you could probably ink this with a Scott Williams style, that Hunt 102.
Totally.
And definitely bring it closer to that style.
And to an extent, Lee Weeks is still playing that game. Maybe he even drew it to be that style, and it's Klaus who softened it up. Because, like, you look at Lee Weeks' stuff, he doesn't do this Jim Lee shit with the hair. Like, this is a very Jim Lee affectation. But, like, look at his comics now. He doesn't put that stuff in there. This is a function of 90s comics.
I tell you what, he draws Wolverine's arms big.
He goes back and forth with the scale of Wolverine, too. Like, there were a couple panels where he's the same size as somebody, but he drew him small in that one.
I think it's really hard to get that scale right. I think you've got to be very dedicated. And the way, like, if you look at John Byrne X-Men, because I think he was really good at the Wolverine height, you don't get panels that are quite like there are new styles of panels in the 90s, probably in the late 80s,
right,
where, like, you're really distorting those figures in close-ups, and I think it becomes almost impossible to maintain that scale well. And also, like, how this is, like, we joke often where it's like, put the tracing paper on there and draw where that other eye is, and the face, and you realize, like, it's the Elephant Man if you just go by this one hard cropped close-up. And I think that that's something that is newer to, like, the 90s than, say, the late 70s, early 80s. It wasn't as common.
Right.
So definitely there's some extra distortion there. This panel feels kind of like one I've seen a lot. The walking down the dark alley. It's effective. It looks good. It's a good way to close out an issue visually.
And if you're at the last hour of your deadlines,
that's true.
Silhouette out the two close buildings and just draw the background behind.
So Lee Weeks probably the story for me in this issue.
Absolutely.
But Gambit, I do know people who love Gambit. If you're a certain age, that may be your X-Man.
We were waiting for this. The idea that Gambit got his own series like this was freaking huge to us, man. I think the cartoon is out at this point, so we were all pumped up.
I like the gold cards. Kind of makes me think might be better if it were just that was the only gold. But if you're gonna pay for gold foil, you know.
Do you like the debossed hair that you can feel?
Is that
the
right?
puffy hair.
I didn't realize it was debossed.
Is that embossed or debossed?
Oh man,
I guess it's embossed. Debossed is when it's sunk in.
Well, you know what? The Gambit, the gold on the Gambit is
Debossed.
sunk in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Embossed
But this
is
looks raised.
embellished. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I didn't even realize
Has
that
3
texture was
gimmicks in
all-
one. Plus
all
a
going on
cardstock cover. That's 4 gimmicks.
Well,
And a
that's
Marvel
why
cover.
you're paying $250 for it instead of $2.
Good to go?
I am.
Great conversation coming up, Kayfabers.
This is an amazing issue. This
Tell-
is
tell
one
what
to
issue.
kayfabe effect. Like if you don't have this one, it's a real standout for the Amazing Heroes.
Number 69.
How about that? The Toth Kirby DC Comics Presents issue. I'm gonna put a
Do you have that comic?
marker in here. Oh yeah, I might have doubles of it to be honest.
That was a grunt like you're 1 year older now, Jimmy.
I feel it sometimes. You know what I was thinking was like a episode we look at, and it would be, I don't know the overall like what we would be looking at, but it'd be like Chaykin's Shadow 1986, Tim Truman Hawk World, Byrne Superman, Frank Miller Dark Knight. There's one other one that is
George Perez Wonder Woman.
maybe there's another one. It seemed like DC really was like, you know, and I guess it's in conjunction with Crisis on Infinite Earths, but it seems like they really like went for it, and it's such a good year. And then you look at Marvel, and it's just that stupid new universe. You know, like Marvel totally doesn't
right.
do it, but DC really was trying. You know, it's
Totally.
like Dark Knight's the one that burns so bright, but they gave like a bunch of people kind of like, hey, go make a good comic,
Right.
make this character interesting. You know, whichever character it happened to be. I think there's one other one I was thinking of that was like a notable creator. It'll probably come to me in the middle of this.
Maybe new. Well, no. Because that just carried on.
Maybe that's all of
The
them.
triumvirate is definitely Byrne, Superman, George Perez Wonder Woman, and then, you know, these other satellite ones. Animal Man comes. Good to go.
Yeah. Hello and welcome to your favorite YouTube channel, Cartoonist Kayfabe. My name is Jim Rugg.
I'm Ed Piscor.
We have a doozy of a video here today, Ed. I am looking forward to talking to you about the Miller's Back Amazing Heroes issue. But I want to remind everyone at home, we are a daily comic book YouTube channel. We've been doing this for 5 years, have 1,700 plus videos for you guys to search through for your favorite creators, characters, and comic book titles. And you can do that on the Cartoonist Kayfabe YouTube homepage. If you love comics, I'm sure we've got plenty of videos that you will enjoy. We also want to tell you about the Cartoonist Kayfabe Patreon. Helps keep the lights on at the recording studio here. We have 3 different levels of access to our videos there. You'll get to see videos early, and at the King Kayfaber level, you will get to see all of our videos first because you can sit in on the recording session. So if something like Amazing Heroes 69 comes up and you want to add it to your collection, you'll get it for the best price while the copies are still available, because they can disappear or go up in value, something we call the kayfabe effect. The link to our Patreon is below this video. Check it out, and thank you if you are supporting us that way. All right, Ed, without too much further information, I think we're just going to go right to this Frank Miller interview. It is a doozy. Bill Sienkiewicz is in it with him, but look at that cover, man. You know, like, this is post-Ronin. I don't know that Miller has really done anything since Ronin, which would have been like 1983, 1984. So
This is 85, early in 85, so.
April 15th is the issue date. Amazing Heroes bi-weekly at this point, so you get 2 of them a month. But Miller kind of quiet in terms of what has been released for the last year and a half, but still one of the hottest creators in comics. Even if Ronin wasn't a huge commercial success upon its release, it was certainly one of the most interesting books to be published by Marvel or DC in the early 80s. So what's he up to? He's back, man. He's ready to tell you what he's up to.
And this cover reminds me of the Shaft Cable cover that Rob Liefeld drew. And I don't think you get too many of these tandem kind of covers like this. Like, there will be year-end issues and stuff like that might have like a smattering of a bunch of characters. but I don't think you see this much more in Amazing Heroes. So I wonder if there was a conversation that had to be had, if this was sprung upon the big two.
I'm going to say something possibly controversial here, but that looks like a left hand to me, which would give Elektra 2 left hands in this image. So maybe it's a lot like that Cable and Shaft cover.
That's so funny.
This is Lynn Varley colors, but using the flat coloring palette. You know, we often see her doing painted work, like in Ronin and Dark Knight Returns and Elektra Lives Again, but here doing the flat colors. So kind of cool. And I never know with like two characters like this, does Amazing Heroes have to get permission from Marvel and DC to use this?
Well, that's what I'm talking about. Like, did it get sprung up on them?
How about our young Frank Miller? I'm figuring he's probably 28, around 28 at the time of this interview. And pause there just so everybody can kind of see what's going on. Because the more we look at Frank Miller in the 80s, the more I say he's playing chess with everybody else is playing checkers.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And whatever he's past transgressions he's paying for now in terms of health and stuff like that with substances and things, maybe a chunk of that happened around this time, dude, because I don't understand how one person can get the amount of work done that he gets done in like a 2-year span here.
Yeah, it's wild stuff. So jumping ahead to this interview, man, and noteworthy too, his fellow studio mate Howard Chaykin from a couple years past gets the facing ad.
Yeah, go get the Times Squared omnibus, fresh from Image Comics, I believe.
All right. So as we say, Frank Miller triptych. What that refers to is the 3 books that Miller is working on at this time. And that is Elektra Lives Again,
which doesn't come out till 90.
Amazing.
This is 1985.
There's a Marvel Age that has some pages from that early on too. That's a book that you can find like pages from all through the 80s.
And there are pages in here that do not show up in that book. So it's like so much creative discovery. That'll be an amazing conversation to have with them because a lot of the stuff that it seems like go describe the other 2 books.
So the other one you see a Bill Sienkiewicz. That's Bill Sienkiewicz artwork here on Daredevil. They're working on Love and War, the graphic novel. We have a video on that, a really interesting graphic novel. And Sienkiewicz, man, just keeps kind of pushing the limits. And there'll be some of that conversation in this interview too. And then Dark Knight Returns, Miller doing Batman in a very anticipated book. There'll be some interesting revelations there. So that is all stuff that's going to come out in 86 or 1990. But what is not mentioned here is no mention of returning to Daredevil to do a pretty substantial storyline with David Mazzucchelli. I don't know if it's not in the works yet, what the deal is.
It definitely is because it'll be, if this is April and it's bi-weekly, it's issue 80 something where the first issue of Dark Knight comes out. And in that same issue, on the checklist, the last issue of Born Again comes out for under the Marvel section. So it is. I mean, it's several months away.
Yeah, it's close. Wow.
From release.
I wonder, like, when we look back on this stuff, I'm always struck by, like, oh, this guy went from this big run to, like, the next month he's on the next big run that he's doing. Like, this stuff happens so fast.
Yeah, but still, there's more titles to...
Batman Year 1 is going to be coming out late 1986. It begins. No mention of that. So we don't have David Mazzucchelli mentioned here. And it's notable to me because Miller is going to say Bill Sienkiewicz, best artist working in comics. And I don't disagree outright. But I also think like the other guy who you want to fight about who's the best guy doing superhero comics in 85, 86. The other guy's Mazzucchelli. Miller's going to do substantial work with both of them. Not one piece with each artist, but 2 with each artist. So
and Elektra Assassin, I don't know where that falls into the mix.
Not mentioned here, and that's another one that comes out in the middle of 86. So like this is a substantial amount of work that Miller is doing here in 1985. It's basically going to double by the time it starts to all get published the following year.
Right.
That's even before the following year, to your point, because those Daredevils do start up in like, I don't know, August or something like that. So in a couple of months, suddenly Miller's going to have about 5 major pieces come out in like 18 months.
Right.
Unbelievable.
And it all, even these projects grow a bit. Like Dark Knight Returns is being sold as a 3-issue thing.
Yes.
And we know that to be 4.
Yeah, and they kind of break these down. This conversation goes all over the place. Again, Sienkiewicz is in on this too.
Right.
I don't know why he's not featured a little bit more, but I guess they have their agenda that they're pushing Miller here. But it is interesting how this stuff is formed. How, at this stage of Dark Knight development, do you not realize it's going to be 4 books? You know, like he's on his way. He's got a lot of stuff that's written in this interview that, you know, like clearly it's pretty far underway, The Dark Knight Returns.
For sure. Knowing that we still got some time, and Amazing Heroes doesn't do much more coverage. Like the impetus for us talking about this was you suggested we should take a look at the issue that came out when Dark Knight 1 comes out, and there's no talking about it. It's just literally a part of the checklist. That Robin, that feels like a revelation to me. You know, that's like they're giving you a scoop on some big stuff here.
Yeah, and he does mention that Robin is a girl. He says she's white, and then he laughs. I have that underlined as like, I don't know which part of that. It's only 2 words. So is it interesting that the gender or the race? Like, what are we supposed to take from that? Why is that, you know, something that Miller seems very proud of that idea?
Yeah.
I think that he's inking, I'm going to speculate, but I feel like he's inking with it's some kind of like pen line that's super fine.
It's a rapidograph. It's a deadline.
And then like a heavier, almost like a Sharpie in some of this stuff. Just a big black, just putting in the shadows, man, whatever tool you can do it with.
Yeah, probably a brush. Because he's working on Daredevil projects and Batman, to hear his thoughts about comparing and contrasting the characters comes up throughout, and his thoughts on those matters I think is very interesting, because Daredevil's like often suggests as being like poor man's Batman, Spider-Man kind of thing. So Batman is a mythological archetype type character. That's how he thinks of Batman, and then Daredevil is smaller. He calls him a smaller character, more personal.
Yeah, he definitely positions as like Superman and Batman, the light and dark of it. Like they're the big icons of the superheroes, and everything else is going to fall somewhere underneath there. It's interesting to see his thoughts on superheroes becoming more and more preposterous the more down to earth their personal lives become. I agree with that. I think that's interesting. But Miller has a way of like thinking of these things in a romantic way that I just don't see anybody talk about anymore. And
Right.
I think it's a different perspective on the superhero, and that idea of them becoming more down to earth. That is what I see people talk about, and it does feel like we've gone from like classic literature and hero archetypes to something else, slice of life or something, or personal, like this is me. And it's a dramatic difference, you know, like when you're a little kid reading Batman, I don't know that you identify with Batman. It might be cool that Batman doesn't have to play by rules and he wins fights and all of that, but I don't know that like those comics are about I'm Bruce Wayne, I identify. And I think now that is the idea with most of these characters.
And he illustrates that it kind of was then in the 70s, the idea of even like what, like Stan Lee dilutes superheroes, I guess part of his thesis by having like the everyday problems, by making them Joe Average, all that kind of stuff. And those other writers are just kind of following suit. So his thing is like, let's take it back. Like let's really like sort of build up the grandiosity of the character. A word, it wasn't used in this at all, I don't think, but a word that Miller uses a lot in interviews and things is operatic.
Mm-hmm, yes.
And that's a good hedge word to get hyperbole into your comic, to have crazy, weird superhero sex and over-the-top violence. Like it's theatrical rather than real world.
He says the skills of bringing about a sense of wonder have atrophied.
Right.
Exactly what you're talking about. They're a little too human.
Right.
This paragraph, I have it kind of like circled. It's talking about like why a movie like Dirty Harry or even the Superman movie is successful. And he says that we've just broken these characters down, like dismantled them piece by piece over the years. And I've heard a lot of people that make these movies kind of describe this. Like we're trying to get the essence of the character.
Right.
You know, as opposed to the minutia. He says that they've been castrated. They've become rather fat and happy. They mow their lawns on weekends. And that attacks me a little bit because I feel like that's me, fat and happy, and mowing my lawn on the weekend. But I do think like you can look at it from a creator, like an artist standpoint, or any creative business, and think like you don't want to become fat and happy.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's there's a lot of interesting stuff of that sort like throughout this. And a lot of the art, man, he's just putting this stuff like this Batman. knowing what we know now, all of this like preview art that we get to see, this is revolutionary shit, man.
Oh yeah,
This
yeah,
is
for sure.
huge.
He talks about the
I think this is the piece that I think it's the marker, because it feels like these are just uniform lines, these heavy lines,
Right.
and then like this one's a double. You know, like there's
yeah,
some that are
double
double.
it up. Yeah, yeah. that
But
makes
they
sense.
also feel like he's just drawing. These are studies. Like, get it down quick.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of these Batmans that he does where it's pretty much the same figure, maybe like a slightly different pose, and he's lighting both of them completely different ways. Maybe even this is sort of a little bit like that. When he talks about the writing part of the process, he talks about like the brevity and trying to cut all fat. And when he goes through and does his passes, he writes full script, even for himself. And that's been these 1986 projects is where he starts that, because even his Marvel Method stuff and Ronin, he's kind of playing around on the page and discovering things that way. And he's found that like getting the script to be bulletproof is a great way to just tighten things up.
Yeah, this is some of that process work talk, and he says last 3 years he's been doing it. So exactly what you said.
Yeah. So one of the things when he has that script, and he does two drafts. So he does like the vomit draft, and then when it comes time to do the other draft, he finds that he almost always takes the first couple of panels of a scene away and the last couple of panels of a scene away.
Yeah, I remember one of these interviews I think that we looked at. Man, I know it's come up on the show. He talks about like that first Dark Knight, like basically cutting it in half and literally like cutting and pasting panels to
Right.
like make it, fit that page count or whatever. I find that really instructive, and it applies to some of these artists he works with. Because I remember him talking about that with like when the Sienkiewicz pages come in, especially for Elektra Assassin, throw out the script and rewrite it, because like this art is, it almost is like adding an art element to what he describes of like that second draft and things. But imagine the second draft is now Sienkiewicz's art.
Right.
So then the third draft, you're rewriting the script to reflect that art.
Yeah. This is an example. This is probably for that Elektra Lives Again piece that the Miller's penciled rendition. Yeah. So this is for his Elektra comic. This is not in the final book. That hit the cutting room floor.
It's so interesting to see him constructing figures, like cylinders for the arms and things.
Yeah, especially like this stuff where you have the 3D of all this stuff wrapped around her, and you could see sort of how the bubbles work and things.
Also, man, she is yoked.
Cock diesel.
Yeah, like it is very believable that she is now going to cut these people into little pieces, because I don't think any of them are stopping her.
Crazy feet, though.
It is very wedge-like feet.
Yeah, those are those John Buscema How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way feet.
There's a lot of there's not a lot, but in the course of talking about these comics, I get a real sense that Miller is looking at making comics for adults, and he references it in different places in different ways, like talking about European, what's going on there, and trying to get to that point with the comics. But that is a piece that like I didn't even think about maybe, I don't know, a year ago, and it starts showing up in these different interviews and different works that we look at, and I think it's such a mindset as to like, what's the difference between an adult audience and a child audience, especially if I'm not focused on the R-rated content
No,
part.
of course, yeah.
I'm focused almost on like the
Presentation, subject matter.
You're smarter, you're intellectually beyond an 8-year-old. What does that mean in writing? And it's so interesting to see like a creator who is not just thinking about it, but talking about it at a time whenever Jim Shooter's saying, our comics are for 8-year-olds.
The beauty of art history is that we do have these this ability to kind of look back and revisit this stuff, and then you think about the context of the creators, where he grew up reading comics, lifelong comics fan. Like as he grows up, totally mines the American comics language. So then he's going off and discovering Hugo Pratt and manga and stuff, and seeing what else is out there. He's growing himself. He's up on news and a reader of things. We've covered a lot of Frank Miller talk, and he is a very well-read person. Bring a little of that. You're maturing as a person. Bring a little of that maturity to your comics. And it is this incremental thing where he still, at the end of the day, Miller still is a pulp guy. He hasn't done his, Thomas Pynchon, his Infinite Jest type book or something. He's not built for that shit. but he definitely contributed an amazing piece of evolution to the comics medium that will then birth the next kid who's grown up reading his stuff and then pushing the medium a little further along themselves. But this particular run, I was trying to think, like, you know, this is a very, very influential run. The only other guy I think that might have something like that really is when Kirby creates the Marvel Universe.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah,
I can't think of another person in comics like that would contribute as much.
and we've talked about this off air, so I'm going to say a piece on that, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, Ed. This may not be exactly what you're referring to, but for people at home that are like, Watchmen's 86, and, you know, there's all these different pieces that are good or mature. What this does specifically, Miller's Dark Knight Return, it gets bookstore shelf space, and that changes everything. And Art Spiegelman's Mouse collection also comes out in 86, also gets bookstore shelf space. Those two books change the game completely, because now we can make content and sell it in bookstores, and that is an adult audience compared to newsstand market or comic book stores up to that point. Because look, like it or not, comic books have a certain stigma about them post 1954,
right.
And that is that it's kids. That bookshelf is not kids. The bookstore is somewhere adults go and they buy books.
Right.
And Dark Knight Returns and Mouse are the two books that get space in that bookstore. And I'm buying stuff in the late 80s from bookstores, from everywhere, but bookstores included. It's half of a shelf.
Right.
It's this much space.
Yes.
It's next to the Dungeons and Dragons stuff, the
Right.
fantasy section.
Yep.
But it's this much space of, like, you can walk in a bookstore now and you can go to the comic, you can go to graphic novels. Did not exist before 1986.
It's true.
Those two books created a different shelf in bookstores everywhere.
Yeah, it's true. And, you know, something else to think about is that it got a tremendous promotional push with a big investment of money. Full page ads in Playboy magazine. Playboy was probably, like, what are the ads that were in Playboy magazine? Hublot watches,
Yeah.
Rolex watches.
It's an affluent audience that was being advertised to there.
It could be maybe more than $10,000 for that page of advertising, but they did that with Dark Knight, and they never did it again. And it makes you wonder, like, you know, that was such a big hit. It must have paid dividends to do that. Now, did you guys just not receive a piece of work worthy of that kind of promotional push? Like, why not just keep that part up?
It is interesting to think of, like, what would be the next work that you would promote that way.
Yeah, and I would probably
Sandman?
Yeah, that's the first thing that came to my mind.
Yeah, me too. And, you know, people, again, at home, like, I am not saying that Dark Knight is a better crafted comic than Watchmen. It may be, it may not. That's not what I'm saying.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is Watchmen is built on comic books. Dark Knight was a totally different creature. You know, the format, the cost for that format, not just the collected books, but even the individual issues. It was a totally different business model, and it was successful.
Yeah.
And so that's how you get more of that. It's funny how many, like, the one thing that does follow in its release is, like, suddenly there's a whole bunch of $2.95
prestige format.
64 page, 48 page
format.
books. Yes, those things suddenly become like, let's do as many of these as we possibly can.
And then what is it? It's Gilgamesh 2 by Jim Starlin and Hawkworld by Tim Truman and Black Hawk by Chaykin. That has the artifice. You know, we're going to have, like, airbrush color. We're going to have a million panels, like all of that kind of stuff. But it's still fairly rooted in pulp.
Yeah.
Beyond, like, established comic book thinking rather than the stuff that Miller brought to the game.
Hey, I linger here because they talk about they're going to have a very radical piece of work. This is the Daredevil collaboration with Bill Sienkiewicz.
Yeah.
And I think it's really exciting to think, like, they're intentional, like, they recognize this is something radical, this is something different.
Right.
And we often talk about jobbers in kind of a dismissive way. And by the way, this is a Miller quote, the position I'm on in this job, like, he's calling it a job, but what happens is it starts out, it's going to be like 2 issues of the Daredevil series,
right?
And these guys, they're just making it, they're making the best Daredevil story they can make, to the point that then the editors and they acknowledge this can't be part of the monthly. It
Right.
doesn't fit, like, it doesn't look right for that, the audience is going to be confused, you know, like, it starts as a job, but what these guys put into it, it outgrows that.
It elevates it.
And I think that's amazing, because imagine, like, oh man, I don't want my editor to kick me off the book. I don't want my editor to make me redraw this. They are not thinking that way. They are thinking, how do I make a radical comic.
And here's the thing, like, it's not like
By the way, that doesn't always produce good work.
they didn't lobby for this. Denny O'Neil wooed Frank Miller, like, hey man, how about you remember we left Vanessa down there with the Morlocks? Like, how about we tie that up? And he's like, okay, cool. And that was the function of getting them started, to kind of tie up that piece. So of course it goes away, becomes the graphic novel. We have a video on that. What he does do for the series, though, is write that John Buscema issue that comes out, which we also do have a video of. We called it something like the first Sin City, because I imagine he talked with Buscema. Buscema, what do you want to draw? I fucking hate superheroes, blah, blah, blah. All right, cool. Well, I'm going to make you a Daredevil comic where he's not even in costume once.
Yeah. Very brief mention of it here, the Daredevil 219. Do go check out that video, because pretty cool. That,
it's a good comic.
But you know what? In part of the writing, he says the last issue of Daredevil was the first one he wrote full script. We started that with the scripting conversation there. So I just love that these guys are really pushing. They're trying to make different comics, and that means like changing up their methods, taking chances, potentially losing a job.
I think it's crucial. If you're in the position of like financial stability, or you're getting a sort of a big payday, I think that if you really care about comics, like you have to do that. We looked at City of Glass, Mazzucchelli, Paul Karasik. This is a comic that was made after Born Again and after Batman Year One. Mazzucchelli's still spending money from 1986, so he's able to like take a bath basically on producing a literary piece of work that probably isn't going to hold up, in a comic shop or something like that, but it advances things. I got a lot out of that City of Glass comic.
Yeah, I mean, these guys, though, in a little different position. Like, Miller hasn't had a book come out in almost 2 years. Like they're taking chances without the money in the bank.
Ronin brought him a lot of loot up front. He might not have gotten royalties for a couple of years on that, but he was probably at seven figures.
What about Sienkiewicz? He's just come off of a year on New Mutants. I mean, how much is that paying?
Sure. He's in a more vulnerable position, and probably it's probably a lot of outside stuff is what got him his bones. That this is a page from Elektra Lives Again. Here's an interesting thing, Jimmy. They're talking about Lynn Varley's going to color this. She has no name right now. She did Ronin, and that was above average. It wasn't exactly the 4-color process, but it wasn't Dark Knight. So people are seeing this, not knowing what this turns into, and when she colors this stuff, I think it's well after Dark Knight, because it brings so much more technique than what she does even in Dark Knight.
Well, it makes me wonder, because we see pages of this before Dark Knight comes out.
Yeah.
And then, like we said, he's got about 6 works that are going to come out in the next 18 months or so from this issue of Amazing Heroes. This must take a back door, because then he goes to Hollywood. Yeah. So, I wonder if this is like half finished, and then maybe they dust off some of it, or they look at some pages and say, you know what, the stuff he did in Dark Knight Returns, let's do, how does that work, or what do we want to push direction-wise? So this had to be something that I think at some point something had to give, and I bet this was the thing that gave, just because it doesn't come out for 5 years.
But it don't, like, there is, I think that I've seen at least 5 pages that are not in the I don't think this is for that book, but that's not in the book.
Right.
So I think that there was this is something, I think this is an important book to him. I think it was personal, and I think that he was kind of fucking around with it for a long time. I think that this was like the book that he was allowing himself to kind of tinker with for a long time, because it's a weird book. Like it's Marvel doesn't exactly put it out right. It's like Graffiti Designs is a part of the presentation of the big book and stuff. So I mean, it's a very weird package, the way that it eventually does see the light of day.
Yeah, Epic might have something to do with it too. That has to be a legacy. Like, Epic wasn't doing stuff like that by 1990, but that must have been maybe a contract, from back in the day. Yeah, I don't know, but strange that like those pages do exist all over the place, and then the book doesn't come out for several years after you see those pages previewed.
Right. Like, see, I don't know what this is.
Yeah,
that's unpublished.
Yeah, I don't recognize that.
That's unpublished material using the Sin City style, which is extra cool. Very fascinating. So I don't know if we passed it or if it was like in the mix of everything. You don't got to go back or nothing. But
There's a page of Sienkiewicz art that I do want us to at least look at because it's so awesome to
Yeah,
see a
'cause-
bunch of Sienkiewicz.
yeah, because it's part of the conversation also where they're talking about, they're introducing us to new kinds of talk about the art of comics. So Sienkiewicz is talking about like each of the characters is going to move differently. And it's not about
Yes.
representation. It's about feeling.
Yeah, it's great. And the big example is Kingpin. He says that Kingpin, and if you guys have seen Love and Hate,
Love and War.
Love and War.
Check out our video on it.
he is just like a mass.
Chunk of granite.
I think he calls him a mountain in here
Yeah.
at some point. Like, you can't imagine him moving. So that's one of the three guys that's going to move differently.
Yes.
In that he doesn't even move. He's almost like a planet.
Right. And they talk about
That's really cool. Those kind of ideas of like, what kind of characterization can we get in the visual?
and he's setting everything up. I mean, it's a textbook. I mean, there's stuff in here that it's going to directly affect my next work. Each character has their own kind of sense of movement, and he describes it in musical terms of like Kingpin's bass notes, and Daredevil is more he says like piccolo or something like that, like more dancey. And then this other guy somewhere in between. They talk about visual leitmotifs, where each of the characters is going to have their own color associations.
Yes.
You know, Victor, the psychopath, would be a little bit more gray.
And he paints that book, but in here they talk about he's penciled, inked, and colored by Bill Sienkiewicz.
Yeah.
Because like it's so new, the idea of like
We talked about
multimedia.
that. Yeah, we talked about that. Where like they didn't realize like how there wasn't a metric to pay him. Like he got like a coloring fee or something.
It's so outrageous.
Yeah, I think even this sketchbook page makes it to the cover, like on the back cover. I think there's like this little squares on the back.
It's
of
so
that.
wild. Like it's just quick like scribbles for that eyeshadow. You can see those strokes and stuff.
Yeah, getting you the planes.
This is Miller. I consider Bill to be the most talented artist Marvel has, and the one who promises to do the most new things with the art form. And he says, I realized I was working with someone who did a number of things better than I do, so I wrote a story that I would be nervous throwing at myself, but that I was perfectly confident throwing at him. Again, man, from a creative standpoint, I'm in love with it.
Totally.
Absolutely.
And Sienkiewicz is talking about like I took this full script, and I'm thinking through the script. Like I'm trying to figure out how to communicate this stuff on every page without just the moment to moment, with feeling, with vibe, with the lines that are drawn, and this is the perfect vehicle for that, because you have that schizophrenic, psychotic character, and it's that Pictionary thing of like, you know, draw psychotic. Like, what does psychotic look like? And then you could imagine a certain set of strokes for that.
Yeah,
Pretty
super
cool.
cool. Hey, this was a note that I wanted to bring up from Dark Knight Returns. Series has a lot of normal people in it. Miller says the actual chief villain never puts on a costume and never fires a gun. Do you think that's referring to like the replaced chief of police? I can't figure out who this is.
Hold up. I'm sorry.
The chief villain never puts on a costume.
In what book?
Dark Knight Returns.
Okay.
Never fires a gun. He does Batman more damage than any of Batman's past enemies.
Right. Yeah.
Who do you think that refers to?
It might not even be in it.
Right. That's what it's possible, but man, that's a big thing to like disappear, unless like it's personal demons, like the battle's inside, or
Right.
the calls coming from inside the house.
And with some of the stuff that I believe that this was probably something that Miller drew after getting some Sienkiewicz work and rethinking things through, because like there's something here, I think it might be here or maybe it's up there, where it says something about Miller's using like design elements to create the chaos in the character's life. I'm too far away from the words to read it.
Yeah, it's incredible what these guys are talking about. They come down and they talk a little bit about the divisions between cinema and comics.
Right.
And that stuff's enlightening, because you can do interior of a character same way you would in prose that you can't necessarily do in cinema.
Right.
And, Sienkiewicz gets onto it and says, filmmaker must photograph reality while a cartoonist creates it.
Right.
And, that speaks to him really like taking these things and distorting them. And Miller talks about that too, that idea of like exaggeration and distortion being a really strong tool in a cartoonist arsenal, and Sienkiewicz again being maybe the master of it at this time period.
In the that Harlan Ellison documentary thing with Frank Miller, Masters of Comic Art, Frank Miller expressly says something like, I spent a chunk of years trying to make the most cinematic comics possible, and nowadays, 86, I'm making every effort to do the opposite.
Yeah. I just imagine Miller having these conversations with Sienkiewicz and then probably Mazzucchelli,
Sure.
as they start working together, people that are really thinking about the drawing in a way that it feels so far removed from, whatever a house style artist would have been thinking about, and you can see it even in like a Jim Shooter interview where like this stuff is meat and potatoes, kind of like standard, get it to the printer on time. They're not thinking about, you can draw expressively, how does it differ from cinema?
Right.
Like these are really heady conversations. And Miller seems like he is like a rabid dog on this topic. He says it's not going something, remake of something old. You're not going to get the emotion or the value. That's why it's important that a lot more experimental and radical work happen. Things have got to bust open. And I feel like he carried that energy around comics for, into the late 90s. This is stuff that I feel like he was really like passionate about whenever I was reading his stuff on Sin City and some of the work he was doing in the 90s, and still kind of having this conversation.
Right. And that's the part of the conversation where we asked Bill in our shoot interview, like what was the feedback of that stuff when people started to see it? And he said crickets, absolutely nothing.
Yes.
I think
I remember that floored me.
I think a problem with that is the pulp material. Like, at the end of the day, it's still superhero bollocks to the intelligentsia, the New Yorker crowd, and shit like that. Like, you have to go the Mazzucchelli route.
Right. And the other voice would be the ones that, like, if you're used to maybe comparing Herb Trimpe with, Jack Kirby, how in the hell do you
Right,
don't have,
if
you
that's your
literally don't
language.
have words to
Yeah.
describe Elektra Assassin.
Totally. But you know what? They do have language to describe other cartoonists who are, like, in their position to do more, even though they're in the mainstream and stuff, do kind of more independent works, and they call dudes out. Like, there are creators out there who had the opportunity to go off and make their own work without editorial restraint, and they just made more work that seemed like Marvel or DC comics without the specific costumes.
They ask him about Ronin. Like, you go from Ronin, a project whose copyright you own, and now you're back to doing these superheroes. Why? And Miller says, I'm not up for another Ronin. And he talks about how it's kind of a lot harder to do that where you're creating everything.
Right.
Versus, like, there's a lot of infrastructure in place already on a Batman.
Yeah, and that's, like, that feeds into the mythological aspect. Like, that's how mythology works. It's a spoken word. It's a passed down kind of tradition that gets, like, little baubles and tinsel added to it over time and stuff. And he's adding to that, and he's created this situation where, like, people don't want to do Batman comics because, like, this is what you have to stack up to, and you have to be in a certain position to be able to put in that equity, that sweat equity ahead of time. Like, you gotta have a year to try to, like, figure things out in order to compete. Because, I mean, honestly, that's what Miller had. Like, he was able to do. So this is the one where it's like it's almost the same thing, but he's lighting it in a couple different ways, getting real abstract.
I think the first time I saw this was in that complete Frank Miller Batman book.
Right, the big leather joint.
And I man, did I love this art style. It was so, even more powerful than the piece, the style that ends up in Dark Knight Returns, where this just feels like it's so raw. It is just shadows and the barest amount of outline that we need.
I mean, we see all this stuff, and in the last two volumes, the last two books, it is basically this. It is Frank Miller taking the reins. It's almost like, and I love Klaus. We have we're on the record. It's almost like why three's a crowd kind of shit. Like, this is pretty good. But you know what it probably is just it's got the stuff that got redrawn, that Klaus inked, that Miller was unhappy with, and we have evidence if you take a look at the gallery edition. What Klaus would do, those panels that are included, it looks like house style kind of comics. The ink jobs and stuff. He's calling attention to all the lighting. It looks like a Klaus Janson kind of ink job. It looks like a panel from their Daredevil contributions and stuff. This does not look like a panel of Frank Miller Daredevil.
Whenever you see this stuff, like, okay, this is good for a sketchbook at this time period. I wonder about Miller's line changing in Dark Knight Returns as he works with Dave Mazzucchelli and the conversations they might have about line quality and what that brings to even audience maturity levels.
Yeah, he's.
I mean, I don't know that that's the case.
He name checks stuff, and before Mazzucchelli is Hugo Pratt.
That's true.
Cordo
yeah.
Maltese is like a place in Dark Knight Returns, and Hugo Pratt would have the deadline and stuff.
I love it with an ad. It kind of fits, like you're thinking of what's going on that's good in comics, and Miller stuff seems really far ahead at this point, but that ad looks pretty sharp next to it. Jaime Hernandez, so kind of cool.
Still filling out the Carrie Kelly, a little bit taller than she will be in the thing. Has a little different eyewear, but that is the mutant eyewear.
Yes. Yeah. References the European comics market is something, bookstores, new audiences.
Yeah.
And the new audience, if we were going to boil down a lot of that conversation of like making comics for a more mature audience at this time period, it's that new audience. And it's like we could all keep applying that and trying to keep that in mind as we make comics as creators, is like new audience. Always think about building that new audience.
Whenever Hip Hop Family Tree came out, the people that I was like touring the country with, it was like Jean Lun Yang, who, with American Born Chinese and Boxers and Saints, brought people interested in that subject matter. Lucy Knisley, who is making American food comics. Like, I was next to her at conventions where, like, old Karen ladies and shit paid good money to come to this fucking convention with Ewoks and Klingons and shit walking around. They came up to her table, thanked her so much for the comics that she made, bought whatever she had on the table, and then they just went home.
You don't think they went over to the Rob Liefeld line after that?
Absolutely not, man. There was like a chunk. There was a class of people that like I toured with, and we all brought something else. Like we filled in some gaps, man, with the comics and shit that we were putting together, and that's like, do it, fucking do it, man.
Yeah. And finish it up with a checklist of Miller art. And top thing, man, interior art is APA 5, which Miller was a member, featured a considerable amount of Miller's work during his fan days in the late 70s, including a detective comic serial he wrote and drew, Call It Karma. And let me just put it out there, man, we get all kinds of awesome stuff from our audience. I am begging our audience, if you have access to an APA 5 with Miller artwork in it, scan that stuff, make it available, put it on record, because there can't be very many of those APA 5s. I've never seen one in person. And I mean, like, I've probably seen more comics than most people. So if you happen to be watching this and you have those, please make that stuff available, because like those books are just disappearing to history. And it won't be long before maybe the opportunity to try to gather this work is just lost. So I would love to have access to that early Frank Miller doing detective comics as a kid creator. You know what I mean? Like, when you consider what his career becomes and with the Sin City and how much he's advocated for crime comics, it'd be pretty cool to see him. What was he doing as a teenager? What were those crime comics like? So,
well, how about we take a look at one just real quick, and then you could just cut and let me, because I mean, if you bring it up so much, we got to look at it. Let me see if it's even in this one. It's not laid out very well where you could like get to it easy. Take a look in here real quick, man.
did you meet Bill Shelley to get that signature?
Yes. Yeah. At ECCC, which is where I was sitting next to Lucy Knisley. I think it's got to be in year one, man. Yeah, I think it's. Oh no, here it is.
Yeah, I think I have this one.
Here
I
it
don't have
is.
that one.
All right, let me reset it, and then maybe show the cover. All right, we're back. Yeah, so in what's the name of this book? Phantom's Finest Comics, Volume 2. Shouts to the late great Bill Shelley for collecting all this material. Chapter 9 of Call It Karma. So 8 chapters happened before this thing, 1976. And check this out. So you have the Fixer. That's a character that shows up in Miller Comics. Electra, different last name here, and then there's like Nicholas Manolis is one of the. He's like a corrupt in Born Again. He is like the cop that like sells out
Okay.
Matt Murdock or
Yeah.
Karen Page or something like that. But like, look at this, man. It's noir. It's got that Steranko influence, Wally Wood influence, and it's a chunk of pages. Like, so there might be 100-page Frank Miller story out there. I had people ask Frank Miller about this. He didn't have any intel. I talked to Bill Shelley when he was still alive about this. Bill, how do we get the rest of this? And he said, good luck.
Yeah, like I say, it's something I have not come across, but we have a pretty good audience reach out there. So, man, if you're watching and you can contribute to this, let's try to put this together.
Yeah, because the bummer is whenever they talk about this period of Miller's work in like Comics Journal interviews, the little glimpses that you see are always from this exact story. Paul Chadwick was a part of this. Paul, do you have a set of these things? And if you do have all the Apple 5s that have Call It Karma, can we get somebody to scan that and make a PDF?
Yeah, and by the way, man, if you have one chapter of it, can
Sure,
we get
any
that
of
one
it.
scanned?
Any of it, yeah, absolutely. Super fun conversation, so much food for thought, and some of it is directly going to influence the very next works that I put together. Jimmy, you good to go?
Yep.
Do you think your phone needs some juice, or can we?
I think we can get
Cool.
regular issue out of it.
Mind if I do the flips on this? And it ain't really much going to be about reading, but I'm gonna need you to do the handoffs, Jimmy. So, guys, that time is upon us where the new Deadpool flick is going to be coming out. So we're going to look at that first appearance of, or the first interaction between Deadpool and Wolverine. But it's a very notorious comic because there's so much swiping. Now it's all over the place, so maybe get the X-Men in order, like, because it'll be like, just so that you could grab them easier. You get what I'm saying?
Well, the only thing is, I don't know what issues they're in.
I'll tell you.
Okay.
Because, see, I put a note on these.
Ah, perfect.
So when I get to the page, I'll be like, yo, hand me X-Men 1 or 270.
This is just the cover.
Yeah.
You want that out of the plastic?
Yeah, it's just so there's no shine.
What issue's that? 276.
Is this one mine, Jimmy?
Yeah. Yep, that's yours. All right. Are you ready?
Yes, sir. Welcome to your favorite YouTube channel, Cartoonist Kayfabe. My name is Ed Piscor.
I'm Jim Rugg.
Highly controversial episode of Cartoonist Kayfabe today. First, we are on the road to 100,000 subscribers on the Cartoonist Kayfabe channel. After 5 years, man, we've been putting in a lot of work. Would appreciate it if you join the Cartoonist Kayfabe channel as a follower. Hit the bell, hit whatever you need to so that we can deliver you these videos promptly so that you could get a jump on things. We have a Patreon, and at the Patreon, you get access to all the videos before anybody else. Mitigates the kayfabe effect. We often will talk about something that disappears on the aftermarket pretty quickly. The King Kayfabers are the ones that get their hands on it first, and a lot of them are hanging out with us in a live stream recording sort of chat room as we make these videos. We do have more than 1,700 videos as a daily YouTube channel. That suggests we might have talked about your favorite comics. So rather than just put something willy-nilly in the comments, give the channel a search, hit the magnifying glass, search for your favorite comics, and check out those episodes. All that being said, Jimmy, can we jump into the first appearance, the first meeting of Deadpool and Wolverine? Maybe the subject of the movie that's coming out, but you sort of hope not, because it's a very milquetoast comic. I asked you to give this comic a read. It's a pretty bad read. Something about Kane becoming a thespian and a theater player.
It's so bizarre because I was reading Wolverine till shortly before this. This is maybe within 5 issues. I had quit Wolverine before this. Larry Hama writes the bulk of those.
Yeah.
And he writes these, and I liked a lot of those comics.
Sure.
But this one feels like I don't know if it's severely late on everybody's part, but it does not feel up to the Larry Hama Wolverines I remember. And I always think about like, oh, we should look at Wolverine 42 or, like one of these issues that he's written. It makes me wonder, like, is my head wrong?
Yeah, right. I know what you mean. Something as simple as this. Now, these comics are presumably Marvel Method, which suggests that the drawing is done before the writer sees the thing. So take in the aesthetics here. You got a door off the hinges, really fucking severely knocked off the jam with cracks and stuff. Something about the splintered door told me there was trouble here. You think?
Now, that could be really funny, except in the context of this issue, you realize that's not how these captions are lining up.
No, so we're not gonna focus on too much about the story content because it's just very thin. Like Wolverine,
I feel like you've already covered it.
Yeah, we totally covered it. But you see all these little post-its, right? And we got a chunk of other comics here. Now, this is a very notorious 2-issue sequence, and Deadpool is not in issue 89. It's all 88 is the first appearance. And by the way, this comic is costly, $100 comic.
Wow.
Yeah, because of this. But it is a notorious comic. The first couple pages here are drawn by penciled by Adam Kubert, who was the principal guy, and like that's tough as fuck, dude. He's way down, getting way down there. But there's this guy Fabio Laguna, who I do not want you guys to fuck with online. Like, leave this dude alone. He's pretty much out of the game doing art jobs for like stuff that isn't comics. But this is like the most swiped 2 issues of comics in fucking history. Almost everything this Fabio Laguna dude does comes from other sources, and I knew it at the time because like this is my Kmart era of buying comics. So I was reading Wolverine still regularly, and
by the way, I like that cover.
Great cover,
wild.
very graphic.
Yeah,
you never saw covers like this, which is like flat color. This motherfucker, this Fabio dude, cribs even some Adam Kubert from like 2 months before. While I was reading this stuff.
The swipes make me think of Rich Buckler.
Yes.
And quite frankly, I'm surprised Marvel did not lean into that at some point. And Buckler famously was doing Fantastic Four and doing like Kirby swipes and stuff. But it kind of feels like if you can't have Kirby, this, like we're still using the same characters.
Right.
It surprises me that that's not something that was more of the, almost like the house style being swipes rather than just borrowing certain drawing techniques.
Now, I'm confident that almost all of this is swipes. And it's just like the egregious ones are, you just know clearly. But like this face, and, feels all over the place, the sort of art style and things. But like this feels different than, this in terms of lighting and stuff like that. As I was checking out these comics, I started to think about like Fabio Laguna. Like I need to Google this guy. Like something is fishy here. And then I saw that he was represented by Glass House Studio, and that's run by that guy Dave Campiti. And I had interaction with Dave Campiti in the 90s as a teen. Like I was en route to try to be a penciler at Marvel, and he ran a kind of a factory situation with South American talents.
Yeah, we cover him very briefly in a Wizard episode that's showing off, I think, Mike Deodato Jr. and Roger Cruz is like upcoming hot artist, and he's kind of like agent in between, and did that with a lot of artists from that area.
Exactly. And so Roger Cruz, another one, swipe heavy dude. He was stealing from Joe Madureira to the point where Joe Mad could do like 2 issues and then take an issue off, and then it would be Roger Cruz doing a Gilbert kind of situation, trying to be Joe Madureira. And I would always get mad. Oh, fuck, it's another Roger Cruz. He'd be cribbing from Joe Madureira to the point where Joe Mad is on newspapers that, Professor X is reading, saying the headline, Cruz swipes again and shit like that. It's a diss. You're copying my style. But when I was showing my submissions to this Dave Campiti character, weird dude too, man, because he had that like jinky girl next to him, right? Like she had a comic and they dressed her up in a damn schoolgirl outfit, and clearly it attracted dudes to the booth.
Booth babes.
but she had her own comic. It was a very weird situation. I've gone to Japan a million times at this point, and there will be guys who have a Japanese girl or somebody with them, and you're like, what is that, man? Very, very fishy circumstance. But Dave Campini, this dude told me, like, you know what? Your storytelling's good. Your anatomy is sound. It's professional. If you wanted to work in comics in 1988, if you crib Jim Lee style, you have a better shot at getting a job. And this Fabio Laguna took it very literally. See, I think this is copied.
It does look like,
and I think it's Greg. I think it's Greg Capullo from X Force. So you guys call out the swipes. In fact, I know this one's a swipe, and that's Colossus and X-Men 1. Like, that's definitely in here. You might know the image that I'm thinking. So I have a bunch of Post-its like ready to go, but there's definitely some pieces you might have to cut. Okay, it might not be this one, but this is Colossus. This one's super clear. You know which one that is, dude. That's Wildcats 1. Last page. Boom. Got your Zealot right there.
it's so funny without the swords.
You're going to see a lot of that. You're going to see a lot of that.
Hand, like,
yeah,
what's that hand doing?
She's holding on to the panel. You're going to see a lot of that throughout. This pose right here is a Zealot as well, but I couldn't find the issue. But that's definitely and so it like that's totally a crib thing, and we're calling out because it's so egregious here, and we're on the record saying like who gives a fuck about swipes and stuff. When you do it so much, it calls everything you do into question. So like if this Laguna character drew something kind of fresh on his own,
yeah, you don't get the credit.
You ain't getting credit.
That all said, the comic that is 100% literally a swipe for every panel, I would buy that.
Right. That's a postmodern piece of art. Like
yeah, it becomes
like,
a gimmick.
Like there's something more to it. I'm sure that's copied from somewhere.
I think this could be a McFarlane cover.
I think so. From Spider-Man 1. And in fact, I think this is the page that the Billy Ireland has.
Yeah, you might be right. It looks really familiar, and that square style is something that, like, it's unusual.
Yeah, that's so cheap looking, man. X-Men 2, Jimmy. And we're looking for a Psylocke getting jammed up right here.
Wow.
And I think what he was doing, this is not the kind of thing where you need to be perfect with it. So I don't think that he's using the artograph projector. He's probably looking at it and just doing his own copy job. But on the very next page, Jim, if you could slide me X-Men 7.
This is like detective work that you've assembled here, Ed.
Yeah, man.
That's impressive.
There you go. 2 Wolvies. And even as a kid, as I'm going through this, it's like, it's all like hitting me. Like something's happening. Like I'm reading this and I'm like, oh, I know I've seen that from somewhere.
I'm so far removed. So the first time I looked at this comic was this week.
Yeah.
And I did not have, I went through the comic before I went through like research on what are the swipes.
275.
And it really, it's a weird thing of like nostalgia where it's like, man, that looks familiar. That looks familiar. That looks familiar.
Now, these are pretty much one for one.
You know, like this is burnt in my head, the 275 cover. So
yeah. So like it's pretty much one for one. He's doing a little bit different stuff here, but there will be times where we're going to have to see him fill in some gaps. Maybe there's something.
You see it a little bit on this arm anatomy. There's some really funny stuff happening right around there.
Right. And he is just not up for the task to fill in the gaps. Now we're looking through more, and I just know that that's surely a stock Jim Lee face.
I think this biker Wolverine I've seen.
I think that might be a Silvestri, and then that's a Jim Lee face that we've seen him draw a million times.
I think this figure as well is something that I've seen.
Right.
It's so
and this
funny.
was the light issue.
I used to get Comics Journal in like late 90s into the 2000s, and they would always have swipe file at the beginning. And
right.
I thought, this did a lot of damage because illustrators swipe, they reference, they trace, they do all kinds of tricks. And it's like, I used to feel so defeated. Like I couldn't even look at a car photo because I was shamed by it.
Right.
But this is funny because this is kind of the other version, like too much.
Right. And it's from one source. It's like sucking at Jim Lee's teeth like too much. It's almost like give that guy some royalties or something. And you see like stuff like this. I could believe that this is Fabio Laguna's skill set. It looks very raw. It looks very rushed. It looks very amateurish.
I think this is a swipe.
I think so too.
Pose.
Yeah. And then we're getting to the era where he's swiping from like Mark Pasella type era. You know, the Art T-Bear inked materials. See this? I put Mark Tex because that's from the shirt. I mean, I think it was a corner box. It was definitely a piece of Ghost Rider artwork. Looking for that X-Men 1 cover, Jimmy. Let's invert it. Let's invert our guy.
Wow.
Almost every page from here on in is gonna have something. Man, dude, if this comes from the issue prior, I'm gonna be over the moon. It really does.
Wow.
He steals from Adam Kubert from the month before.
I don't even know how you would get access to that quick. I guess it'd be photocopies of
Totally.
the issue so that you could stay on, you know.
Totally. That is funny as shit.
But you know what, man? What's the editor say here?
Right.
Right? Because, like, the editor is literally photocopied the front of that previous issue so that this guy could come in and fill in the back half. You got to take some responsibility for this, you know, from the editor too. But you know what? If you're working for Dave Campiti and he's like, "Hey man, do Jim Lee, and I'll get you work," he got him work. Is this the only stuff he did, or these
Pretty
two
much.
issues?
Like, no, he did a couple other very small jobs, I think, man. But yeah, here's your Wolverine. And then, dude, look, maybe he does trace from an artograph projector because, like, it's like the hatchings increased.
You know, to even bring in like the highlight, because that's one of those like really unusual marks that Jim Lee and Scott Williams would do. And I can remember even looking at it at the time being like, that's a weird highlight. Man, he copied that highlight.
Yeah, let's do a twofer. Because like on this very from this very issue of X-Men 1, we got another swipe. But he does a little play. Okay, so this is like an example, right? You see how this is covering up the neck muscles? Yeah. He's got a kayfabe it and just has no sense of, you know, how that anatomical structure works at all.
Wow.
Might probably be best to start to cut these things off. Oh yeah, this is one that I found. So you see that face right there? It's the cover. See, that's the other thing too. Is like he's not even being slick. Like he's taken from like iconic pieces of and see like when he's tasked with doing drapery and stuff, like doing that hatchet, it like does nothing for the shirt folds or whatever.
You know, here's a tip for people too at home. Do different sizes too. You know, like there's things you can do to kind of like throw that off a little bit if you're gonna do it at all.
Oh my goodness, this is so funny. So this piece, I couldn't find it like in my stacks, but this is from Adam Kubert, and it's Wolverine. Like he's doing a little something here because the Wolverine has no mask on. In the piece that I recognize. Okay, so this is X-Men 1. There we go, right there. I think I had the Valentine's card of this.
Did he swipe this in that? This is the first time seeing. I feel like this swipe might be done twice across these two issues, but cropped a little bit differently.
Maybe.
That's amazing. Like swiping the same thing twice would be really.
Oh my
great.
goodness! I just recognized this one. This comes from Extinction Agenda issue. This is Cameron Hodge.
Wow.
And yeah, so that's another Jim Lee swiper.
I'd be willing to bet
Surely.
my left hand that one is a swipe.
Absolutely.
Wow. I wish I could pull these off exactly like where they're coming from. That looks like a
276 interior.
I think it's back a page.
Yeah. Yeah, there you go. But I was actually looking at this because, like, maybe... Oh, no. Okay, yeah, that's definitely from the Extinction Agenda issue.
Hey, I'm going to say this. This Colossus, I have seen swiped by other artists. And I can't tell you exactly where, but that is one that I have seen before. Not by this guy, but by others.
And then one of the last ones we have is grab me X-Men 7. And here's the thing too, like it's the same character. Shit, it might be that X-Men 6.
Yes.
So I guess maybe the editor's like, you know what, switch it up a little bit. So he blacked out the face.
Even the teeth, you know, like he blacks out the face, but like the teeth are exactly, you know, the mouth and everything's the same. It's all there.
Right.
That is surprising.
I feel like this might have come from two sources, because look at how big Maverick is compared to him. Yeah, so leave the guy alone and stuff. I think that he was instructed in a certain fashion by Glasshouse Studio, who was his representative, because like straight from the main dude's mouth, the guy told me to as a teenager to copy Jim Lee.
Yes. Yeah, and you know, this could have been a young guy at the time, just trying to do anything for $1. Who knows? But it's wild. And then whenever, like, I'm going to assume that one may be not swiped. The difference between the swipes and what I assume may not be the swipe is dramatically different.
Absolutely. I mean, it's very far removed.
It's so bizarre, man. What a time period, the 90s and Marvel 90s. Like, no wonder everybody, like, comics are just plummeting at this point.
I pulled this issue out on the strength of this movie being released, right? It makes sense to make this video. Then I go start looking through it, and I'm like, oh no, like there's a million swipes in this comic. And then I go online, and like there are people who kind of like parse them out, and I'm like, damn, I think I have almost every single one of these issues. Makes for a fun video. Once again, leave the dude the fuck alone. No internet army bullshit. It's a fact of the matter.
Yeah.
And we have the issues. It's fun to look at and stuff.
It is amusing.
Don't do it like we're on the record of like swipe whatever, but you just can't do it this amount. You can't pull from all the same source. It turns out that there is a sort of unspoken rule of thumb or something when it comes to doing the swipe gimmicks.
You know that what's funny is we both got an email maybe a week ago, and it was a Wally Wood. Hey, is this a Wally Wood swipe? And I mean, it looked like a trace job over a Joe Orlando.
Yeah, Wally Wood did the swiping.
Yes, and I mean, famous for saying, you know, what is it? Copy what? Oh, I forget to.
Don't draw what you can copy. Don't copy what you could cut out and paste up. And then there was like one other one.
I think one was about stealing.
Yeah.
And so it's a long tradition in comics. It's a deadline saver, I guess. Man, I don't know. It's interesting. Makes for a fun episode. But you could find, like I say, Comics Journal every single month for a long time ran swipe files.
Right.
To the point that, like, my friends, we would look and you would pull out swipes. I mean, there's a long history of that in American comics. And maybe international comics, for all I know.
Yeah, but this is probably the most notorious swiped set of comics.
Yes.
Good to go?
I am.
All right, Jimmy, there you go. I'll set up my gimmicks. How are we doing on time?
12:30.
Oh, we're doing great. Yeah, like I really don't want people to fuck with it, because like this guy, as far as I'm concerned, he's a civilian now, man. Like he don't need to be getting harassed.
Yeah, and also, whenever you're copying something from the previous issue, give the editor some shit if you're real against that.
That is crazy. That is so, dude. You really popped. I that made me wish that we had the double cam, because I think your hand went to your mouth.
It's incredible. It's incredible. Hey, if you are gonna swipe, do it egregiously, man.
Yeah.
Lean in. Like, do any of this stuff 110%. I don't know that stealing is the thing to do, but if you're gonna do it, go full on.
You know what comes to mind immediately is like a comic that uses like all the like most iconic like cover, like Action Comics 1, Detective Comics, Amazing Fantasy 50, like all of the biggest.
Popular stuff, man. It could almost be policy.
Here you go, Jimmy. I'm gonna go pee again real quick. Alright guys, 2 more vids here, and then if we have some time I would like to do some of those shorts, Jim. Just done deleting some vids. Thing I have to keep in mind is to make sure that this mic hits you. So we're looking at the we're going to be looking at the Frank Johnson book. Man, I think I called him Frank Young, and no, I think I was cryptic. And this is an incredible book that Fantagraphics has put out. Presumably there will be, I guess, 4 or 5 volumes of it if they put it all out. 2,500 pieces. I do have some preemptive criticisms that I need to get across so that they don't fuck this up in the future. And if you guys are unfamiliar, we'll tell you the story with the video. Looks good. Good to go. No, let's just stop it. Oh, I know exactly. Not bad, Jimmy. Just glad we caught it. It's never that bad, but you just get more of that. You could hear the furnace and stuff. Yeah, we're good. Lock us in.
I wonder, open it up and make sure that it's bright enough inside. You like that, or should I lock it inside?
Lock it in on the whites. We didn't do this the last time. Was it like that? Or was it like a double tap? Yeah. All right.
Ready?
Yes, sir. Welcome to your favorite YouTube channel, Cartoonist Kayfabe. My name is Ed Piscor.
I'm Jim Rugg.
We have an incredible video for you today first, please check out the YouTube channel. We have more than 1,700 videos available to you right now. We might have talked about your favorites. Hit the magnifying glass on the front page of the Cartoonist Kayfabe YouTube channel. Give it a search. Check out the episodes where we talk about your faves. We have a Patreon, and the King Kayfabers on our Patreon get access to all the videos before anybody else, and they are hanging out with us as we record the videos in a live stream recording session. So support the channel that way if you are so inclined, and get the scoop early on the things that we talk about. And we are on the road to 100,000 subscribers. If you dig the channel, it would support us a lot if you follow the Cartoonist Kayfabe channel, hit the bell, all that good stuff. And without further ado, Jimmy, let's jump right into the Frank Johnson book, Secret Pioneer of American Comics. What an incredible discovery that has occurred, I think, in about the comics. People started to find out about this in about 2016, 2017. Dan Nadell's name is mentioned as being one of the people that sort of happened upon it. Take a look at the back of the book. Astonishing historical and artistic discovery. A 2,300-page protographic novel begun by a quote-unquote weekend cartoonist in 1928 and continuing over the next 50 years. Ladies and gentlemen, this is 5 years, 6 years before the first comic book, and even those comic books were not issue-length pieces. This is pulling from strips, but you get the picture. When Frank Johnson, an itinerant musician and shipping clerk, died in 1979, he left behind a startling discovery. More than 2,300 notebook pages of comics and 131 unbound drawings, among them a long continuous story beginning in the earliest surviving notebook dated 1928, before the existence of comics. Following the exploits of his cast of characters across 50 years until Johnson passed away. During this lifelong project, Johnson invented in private many of the conventions and tropes that define comics storytelling, effectively enacting an alternative secret history of the comics medium. This collection is the first ever publication of Johnson's work, includes Wally's Gang, a 50-year magnum opus chronicling the humorous, cliffhanging adventures of a group of bachelor friends, The Bowser Boys, a seamy, darkly slapstick depiction of bohemian street life that could be considered the first underground comic story. Juke Boys, absurd, self-reflexive graphic experimentation. The people who brought us this book, Jimmy, is curator and historian Christopher Byrne, and fine artist and graphic novelist Keith Mayerson, who have not only brought this astounding work into the light, but provide historical background and analysis as well. Can't disable the power of my label. This is published by Fantagraphics.
Keith Mayerson,
You know him from Dangerous Drawings.
is he Horror Hospital Unplugged? Is his graphic novel?
Yes.
I think he did something else too, but that's the one that I came across in my reading.
And that's about it. And even Dan Clowes doesn't call himself a graphic novelist. He's coming into this from a fine arts perspective. And what we get up front is a foreword by Byrne, talking about how he came into knowledge of this material, and it's past hands. It was a step grandson had custody of all of these notebooks. It's a ton of notebooks, and was just kind of sitting on them, and then meets somebody or whatever. Dan Nadell sort of discovers it, from some other groups that have it. Somebody bought the pages off the grandson and then warehoused it at some university. Right now, it's Karen Green has it at Columbia.
Good hands.
Great hands. And it's on like long-term loan.
Pause here. Well,
yeah.
Keep going, but I think there's probably a lot of this stuff like this, where it's like you're cleaning out a house. Your step grandfather died. You're cleaning out a house or whatever, and it's like we're just throwing stuff out. Totally. This stuff has to get. It's paper. Yep. Paper just gets thrown out, man. Like I've cleaned out a house, and there are people that come through that do it professionally, and it's like this is a dumpster item if you're not careful.
So I read the back piece to you, right? 2,300 pages. I'll break your heart. Ready to have your heart broken? It starts off with notebook 91. The first 90 notebooks are not in existence anymore. They're dust. Now,
Wow.
if they're pulling the greatest kayfabe over on us, and just some dude drew this last year, and they're telling a tale,
Oh, I tip my hat if that's the case.
we'll know that's the case if after the books come out that like they rediscover the first bunch of books.
Well, you know what? I wonder if do they say that all those are gone? Because I
They
wonder
do say
if
they're gone. Yeah,
see,
yeah,
that's a bummer.
Yeah, they are
Because
gone.
you'll see in that directory. I mean, is it? Should we believe 92 to 109 are missing, or is that something where it's like we're going to curate a little bit because you want a hot shot?
Totally, and they do talk about like books number 109 to 120 were like artistic exercises, but I do think some of those are in here.
Because here's the other thing: it's paper. It's sitting in a box.
Yeah.
Who knows? In a garage, in an attic, in a basement.
Right.
Like it's not just thrown out. There are fires, water, a lot of ways you can lose this stuff.
Absolutely. And now the book 90, this is when he's 16 years old. So those other things, and it's 1928, like those other things, do you remember those little composition tablets that you would get in elementary school, like one a month or one a week or whatever? It was the shittiest paper ever.
Yes.
Dude, this guy's wife had no idea that he was doing this. It was completely foreign to her when he passed. And I imagine, like, there's a guy that lives behind me, and you just hear that welding fucking thing going. What is he welding? He does not want to be in the house with his old lady, this motherfucker, man.
I just watched Byrne after reading the Coen Brothers movie. That guy's making a sex sex chair.
This motherfucker is just, well, he does not want to be in the house with his old lady. And I imagine that a part of this is that deal. This Frank Johnson fella, alcoholic. So they sort of make allusions to him kind of tying his sobriety to just kind of keep him busy with this. There is a period of time, like an 8-year span of time, where he puts down a story and picks it back up, and they think that he was probably on like a nice fucking long bender.
That's interesting. Sometimes you'll hear about addicts have sort of like a nervous energy. They need to be doing something.
Jimmy, like, you know, I don't do shit, right? Like you've never seen me drink, like nothing. I have compulsive tendencies, and I think I'm an addict, and I'm scared to death to touch anything because I am a compulsive person. I can't keep junk food here because I'll eat a whole thing of Pringles.
Yeah, right. Yep. I have that. We always say like artists, especially comic book artists, OCD, right?
Right.
And it's like an undiagnosed half joke, except that it's kind of true. We all have those tendencies, and I never thought about that. Like, and so many cartoonists have alcohol issues,
Right?
Especially historically. Like, man, you read about these guys that die of alcoholism. Man, I never connected those two things.
Right. So then you have your Keith Mayerson part, and I guess he teaches comics or something at School of Visual Arts and has done so for a long time. But you know, I don't. What's his that horror hospital thing or whatever? Is that cool? Is it?
It's good. Yeah. He draws it. The breakthrough for me with that book is he draws in different styles throughout it, and that really spoke to me.
Yeah. Here's my only criticism of this material. Thank you so much, Keith Mayerson. Thank you so much, Chris Byrne, for your contribution to like bring this out into the light. On future volumes, I need to hear what Dan Nadell has to say. Like, I need people who have way more skin in the game in terms of the comics medium to weigh in on this, because like we could put our own opinions to this ourselves here. I need Karen Green to speak on it in a future volume. I want Art Spiegelman to write a piece on this. Chris Ware maybe. Like, thank you guys, but I just know that both of these dudes are going to have their stink on every volume, and I don't want that. I think that it'll fail, because the beauty of these collections of comic strips, Frank King's and all that stuff, is the front and back matter.
Right.
The comic content of this is almost irrelevant to like the amazing discovery of all of this material. Like, as a great outsider artist, you can you can build a crazy mystique by just having volume, even if it's no good. What Mayerson does is he ties it well into the Henry Darger, Daniel Johnston type idea, breaks down what outsider art is.
I'll tell you this, there's more of this stuff out there.
Oh,
and
totally.
not just this artist. I know of a guy who has several thousand pages that his father drew. Hopefully some of that will see the light at some point. But also there were cartoonists that would be not syndicated. They would make strips in their local papers. I mean, there were thousands. Newspapers were everywhere and comics were huge. So a lot of people dreamt of that.
Right.
And they only made it as far as their local paper, in which case there may not be archives.
Yeah.
But also there are literally hundreds of comic strips like that people really haven't poured over yet to be like, you know what, this guy's a gem. We didn't realize it at the time, but this little backwoods newspaper had something special. Let's collect these. And you see more and more of that coming up, and I think more and more of that will continue to come up. But you are fighting time because it's paper.
Right.
You know, like these things are getting not digitized and lost. So hopefully we will see more of these kind of outsider cartoonists.
Now, the superstar of this package is Kayla E., who did the design work for this thing. Choosing this, like, feel this right here, Jimmy.
Yeah.
It feels like those old
really
shitty composition notebook band. Like, how do you
Great
even know what to
production.
ask for? And it's all direct scans.
That's the genius of this book. The
Very
four
important.
color.
Very important. Very
Wow.
important. So the very first story is like, it's a long one. It's called The Bowser Boys, and I do think it's the one piece that is in ink. Does that look like ink to you?
Yeah, it looks like ink.
And it's
Boy, and that's old school, like pen and an inkwell, you know?
right. Yeah, I guess was the ballpoint like that comes later.
Yeah, way later. Like those inkwells would be part of the desks, you know,
Right.
like in the 20s.
That's crazy.
You'd
On
have
top of that shitty paper.
ink all down your sleeve and stuff.
I was talking with David. Dude, you were part of the thread, man, where I was like, Cho, you gotta, like, this just came in, like, you gotta get your hands on it. Within a half hour, he was like, dude, I bought 2 copies. And we were talking about, like, the way he draws the drunk guys is so good. You know, like, you could imagine that in, like, a 0-0 anthology or anything like that. This made me fucking laugh out loud, some of these bits. The way that these strips break down are weird, like, because, like, sometimes the punchline will be, like, after 1 panel, but sometimes it'll be after 4. So it's sort of all over the place where that's concerned. There will be parts where, like, okay, yeah, they see the girl taking a bath, and then they go, hey, what you running away for, man? She can't see it, and they're like, I'm afraid of the soap and water. You know, it's cheesy, like the writing and all that. Like, it's sort of, it's not the point. It's the point that the guy did this much stuff, and everything that I've read so far, because it's a big one, is pretty good. It's really, I mean, it's solid cartooning. Now, this is a piece that he did, like, over a big chunk of time, but then we could see what kind of pen is that, dude. Starting to not archival inks, right?
I don't know what that is. That's.
I think it was probably a black ink that got fucked over from too much exposure, or just the ink perished or something.
Yeah, that may be something one of our older historian fans, art historians, can weigh in on. You know, what would create that look. This is really amazing.
Totally. And this is the part where following is the first surviving volume of comics by Frank Johnson, Wally's Gang number 91, created in 1928 when he was just 16 years old. Boom.
Working in pencil. Look at that, man. Drawing a bike. Bike's so hard to draw.
Yeah. 2 panels per page. Pretty rough stuff, but, like, very cool that he did it, you know?
You know, it obviously it's simple in a lot of ways, but it also has stuff where, like, we're getting different values and textures, like, and it looks good. Like the aged page, giving that little bit of yellow patina,
Sure.
helps. You know, it's a nice presentation here too.
And he's drawing, you know, that's your Barney Googles and the aesthetic of the day that you would see in the newspaper strips, for sure.
Wow, it's neat.
And it's
Man.
great that it has all the
Makes me
notebooks,
wonder
you know?
about things like he's 16. Like, when does the alcoholism start to enter?
right.
Because I mean, people were drinking at 16. You know,
Totally.
who knows? Man, and also like prohibition would have been. You know, like he would have maybe encountered that at some point.
Right.
Look at that. That's pretty complex. Comics in comics.
Yeah, man. No, this guy is fucking sharp.
Dude, these are tight. This is maybe a later volume there, but he got pretty high level there.
Totally. And this comes a ways later. This is 41, 42, and this other piece was 28.
That's fantastic that he stuck with it like throughout his life.
To his
What a
dying day.
record.
Into the 70s, man.
You know, like, good stuff here.
Yeah. 1942.
You know, the other place where you might find some things comparable is there are cartoonists out there that have treasure chests of their childhood. The Seth has comics that he made when he was 16.
Right.
How about it, Seth?
I know,
This is a
Larson.
nice presentation.
Rick Veitch.
Well, Larson's, I think, might be gone, sadly.
Rick Veitch has his, man. He puts up stuff online. Rick, let's get him, dude.
Alex Ross, I mean, he showed some off at the Warhol Museum exhibition, so that stuff's out there.
Dude, did he get hold of some Basil Wolverton, a little Powerhouse Pepper influence?
It's really interesting because Fantagraphics has published some. Oh man, when he starts putting lines down, that's something. That's pretty interesting. Almost like new language that he's introducing there to
Yeah,
his style.
1945 this round.
But the Wolverton books that Fanta has put out, they have a lot of bio and a lot of his like all the work that exists. So you're
Right.
seeing like his childhood and development stuff, and it makes me wonder like, was this guy rejected from somewhere? Was he like turning these things up, trying to get work as a cartoonist?
I mean, this is pencils. This is
Yeah,
This
it's
is nothing,
not
like
quite there, but like, man, I would think that it's much further along than a lot of people. It's almost like the tool is what you're missing for the finish. Or something.
Absolutely, man. And growing up here in Pittsburgh, I have met very, very creative people who are so humbled and like, movies. Oh, those are made in California. You can't make a movie here. And sure, they have a hobby or something, but that's what it is. They can't conceptualize that you can actually be the one to get paid and prosper and do all that stuff like that. That's something extra. This is a deep compulsion, and the fact that I don't know if it's in this stuff. I think that they made allusions to it's in the future volume, like even from like the material from the 70s, where there's like fourth wall breaking stuff where the characters are talking about the creator and saying stuff like, oh, he must really love us to spend all this time with us and things like that. So, I mean, this guy is completely in his own world. It's kind of like that Marwin Call or whatever, that guy that like
made the little
dolls
miniatures
and
in
stuff.
his backyard.
Yeah. Yeah, he just has a whole world. The thing that I've been fantasizing about, and I've joked about it in jest on our weeklies, where I'm like, I've entered my Henry Darger stage. And Darger had Vivian Girls, a 15,000-page manuscript that has never been published. And I remember joking, like, where's the comic version of that? This is the comic version of that.
They do a good job having the dates in the bottom corner.
Very
That's
important.
some information I'm happy to see is very clear.
Yeah.
It's amazing how this stuff has evolved, too, because if this is published 20 years ago,
Good point.
it's probably black and white. It has to be a relatively expensive book to produce in 4-color like this, an artist edition, if you will.
It's a good point. They bring that up in early, where it would be stuff like the guy who did that Snowman.
That's so awesome.
Totally, the guy who did that Snowman kids book. That was like some of the earliest
Biggs.
printing that used something that wasn't ink.
That's so, man.
Doesn't
I
it feel
want to know
completely
so much
professional?
more.
Me too. And unfortunately, just like Darger, like if you read one Darger book, you read them all because there is no real record. There's not that much. I do have a feeling that that's the case here,
Yeah.
which is why the curator and that Mayerson dude, like you gotta allow yourself, not have the ego. Thank you, but we need comics intellectuals. We need Jeet here to write something about this.
Yeah, for sure. Love whenever these panels deviate from like a 2-figure. There's so much of the kind of the figure stuff, which is fine.
Right.
But it's really cool when he goes outside of that and tries something different.
This is that dull pencil. This is that pencil that you sharpen it on the built-in pencil sharpener in your basement. You remember those, man? Your old house have that?
I did, and it was a great pencil sharpener, man.
Yeah.
It was really, I missed that pencil sharpener. So
Heavy
I should
duty.
go home and take that thing off the wall. And,
Heavy duty, man. And they were just like that inkwell,
Yes.
right? They were built into the shelving of those old basements.
Yeah, I put a lot of miles on that pencil sharpener. Yeah, this guy does some really interesting stuff, and I wonder if, you talk about like future volumes of like fourth wall breaking stuff. I wonder if you do get some auto-bio stuff working its way in there.
Right.
I want everybody that's involved with this to write about it. Like Karen Green put it in context. Like, what are those later? What aren't we seeing? Like, what do you know about this?
Exactly.
And who has gone down the rabbit hole, like trying to figure out more about this guy's life? Because
yeah, we need
people
Paul
do
Karasik.
that. Yeah, exactly. People do it. So investigate this. It's fascinating. And I don't have like the dates and stuff in front of me, but I wonder like what he's pulling from. If it's like what the popular strip of that era is,
Right.
Like, is he working things in from, where you could recognize like, oh, he loved Bushmiller, the period with Fritzy or something, like I wonder about that kind of stuff too, like how it stacks up with what is contemporary of when he's drawing it. And
Right.
you think, what info do we have when we have those dates?
Yes.
That's a good bit. We can kind of look at, well, what's being published in newspaper comics in 40, 45, 46, whatever the date is on each of these pieces. You could kind of look at it through that lens too and see like, what's he looking at? What's he bringing in? How's he evolving?
This is that shit, man. Like, if you're real about this, you're doing it even without a record contract. And this guy produced thousands and thousands of pages with nobody even reading it.
Man.
Just for himself. Nobody knew this material existed. And now we all do. It feels voyeuristic.
Yeah.
Like that component is there. I think it's important still, shit.
What's funny is like we're talking on our live episode about wills and intellectual property and what happens after you leave, and you wonder like, did this guy want this stuff destroyed? You know what I mean?
On Henry Darger's deathbed, I think he was like said something about like burn it.
Yeah.
And then they were like, no, it's great. Like it's incredible material, blah blah blah. And he said something like, too little, too late, or took you guys this long to find out, or like some kind of like romantic kind of thing where acknowledging his own genius. What's interesting is like, what are these guys called? Like the something boys, the Wally's gang. So it's a bunch of dudes, and like Vivian Girls is like the same clan of chicks doing stuff. So it's like you have that's the other great piece, right? Like that you have these like reoccurring characters that survive the entire work.
That's pretty sharp.
Yeah, that little
You
circle panel.
do see him continuing to like evolve. It's pretty strong work. I wonder what his day job was.
Yeah, shipping clerk, and then what does itinerant musician mean?
I guess he traveled as like maybe a backup musician in bands. Yeah, it doesn't speak to like the visual art part.
Yeah, none of it. This is just, he had some facility and just kind of kept it rocking. Like, look, that's complicated.
It's pretty cool. He's switched now to this 4-panel grid.
Yeah, we're looking at 1947 materials.
I absolutely love the presentation. Well done to Fantagraphics, to the designer, to whoever gets credit for actually conceiving of this. Wow.
It's my favorite cover.
Brilliant.
And it's like, it's designed. He's got his little
straight edges.
Straight edges and shit. Watch us like wax all over this and we find out that it's a big old Seth Kayfabe or something.
Well, you know what? If you're going to do, what is this, 600 plus pages, like, again, I tip my hat to you.
Right.
Because it's easy to do this poorly.
Right.
So, I'll give credit to whoever produced this. It's hard to believe that, it's crazy we live in a world now, an age, where it's like, can't be 100% sure this was an outside. You don't know what you're actually looking at hardly ever.
Right. And they use the right names, right? Like Dan Nadell's a name that you would want to name drop for something like this, and certainly Karen Green.
That is true.
Now
That's true.
They say that it's there, so you could see it.
Yeah, you know what? Something like that. I can't imagine Karen Green, whose profession is tied to this, would let her name be used for a hoax.
We just turned Cartoonist Kayfabe into a conspiracy podcast.
You know what's funny is like in my head, it's like, well, how? Yeah, like you would have to fool both of them, which means you would have to have some aged notebooks that you put this in,
or just put their names in a damn thing, and it ain't there.
I think Nadell may have published a little bit of this in like Gansfield or somewhere. One of the Kayfabers mentioned that, so. It's possible that he has had some association with this,
yeah.
And I hope he will write about it more.
Yeah, I think that's the essential part. Got your little bios of your guys. That's the essential part. This is fantastic, and I think everybody should have it as just like an amazing comic book discovery. I do stand by it as of the year 2024 AD. I think this is the most incredible discovery in the comics medium of the 21st century. But in order to make this series, which I hope they continue, and we're doing our diligence right now, right? We're doing our part to promote this book. Everybody go out and buy it. But in order for this series to be a great series of books beyond just the craft of Frank Johnson, is we got to get the real writers to pontificate and lend some credence to this material, man. Give me Jeet here. Give me Dan Nadell. Give me Karen Green. Give me Gary Groth. You know, people who have had skin in the game for a super long time.
Give me the person that's a scholar on Henry Darger. You know,
Yeah.
like how does this contextually fit in with another outsider semi-comic style artist?
Yeah, presumably, man, there's got to, you know, if they want to do it all, it's got to be 3 to 5 more of these things, and I'm here for all of them.
It's an amazing book, and man, did they do a good job on it.
Good to go?
Yes.
What's up?
What's he welding over there? The Cartoonist Kayfabe Conspiracy Podcast. There have been a few people who have passed who are like, burn it. And then like the people who, you know, are the caretakers don't listen.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of this. I feel like there's a real famous one that just crossed my path not too long ago. Let me go get that comics journal with this.
Okay, guys, the very last one we're going to do is the Screw Style story from the Neji Shiki collection from Yoshiharu Tsuge. I have that issue.
It's a great issue. Rory Hayes. Like I said, Klaus. Panther.
Here, grab any of these. And if you have the February 2003 issue of Comics Journal with the Panther cover, you have it. Lock me in when you're ready to go, Jimmy.
You ready?
Yes, sir. Fantastic video for you today, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Cartoonist Kayfabe. My name is Ed Piscor.
I'm Jim Rugg.
Gotta let you guys, want to remind you guys that we are on the road to 100,000 subscribers. So if you dig the videos, it would help us out a lot if you hit that subscribe button, hit the bell so that we can notify you as new videos present themselves. We have a Patreon, and the King Kayfabers on the Patreon get access to all the comics that we talk about before anybody else gets to see them by getting the vids from us. Also, they're hanging out with us in a live stream recording session as we produce these videos. And we may have talked about your favorite comics on the channel at this point. 5 years in, 1,700 plus videos in our videography. Go on the front page of the Cartoonist Kayfabe YouTube channel, give it a search, and watch those episodes of us talking about your favorite comics. Without further ado, Jimmy, Drawn and Quarterly has taken it upon themselves to print the bibliography of Yoshiharu Tsuge. And the volume that contains Neji Shiki, also known as Screw Style, has finally gotten a fresh coat of paint and is included in, I think this is the second or third volume of materials that they put out from Tsuge's work. But the Screw Style story is here, and not the first time that it showed up in American comics. If you have the February 2003 issue of the Comics Journal, it gets some treatment in those pages when they were doing that. Well, this is different because they were doing that printing public domain stuff for a while. But yeah, they put out a version of this.
Yeah, some notable differences. The translation's slightly different, and maybe we'll call attention to that here and there. It's nothing major. Thematically, it's the same. It'd just be maybe a little different verb, tense, something like that.
It's
not flipped. Right, the new one is not flipped, so that's a big difference.
Right. So, like, let's use the
Yes.
the fresh version. You know, the more precise version, especially with the ghastliness of this character. When you flip him, you're making him even freakier looking.
Yeah, definitely a strange guy. This whole story, though, is bizarre.
Yes.
Which probably speaks to some of its influence.
I think so too. The aesthetic, like that face, like it's iconic. When I was this very last trip that I went to in Tokyo, Tsuge hooked up with a hip hop DJ shouts to Zen LaRock, and Zen LaRock has a clothing line, and they put together a little capsule edition of like 8 or 10 different garments, and this face would be the central piece of almost every single one of those garments. What was cool when I visited that little pop-up was that Zen had adorned along the side of all the clothes a bunch of ephemera, including an artist edition style book. So I'm kind of telling on myself because this is something I'm going to be hunting for. And now people are going to be out there seeking it and scooping it up. But I have to bring it up when we talk about it because it was very illuminating to the construction artistically of this material, in as much as anything that you think is well observed and referenced is because it's either directly traced from a photo or, coming from some kind of photographic reference. All of the most iconic pieces. The story starts with this character, he's supposed to be a boy, by the way. He got rocked by a jellyfish, and it like severed an artery in his arm. So that's why he's holding himself as he's traversing the terrain. You see probably an American bomber or something flying above. So this is like war-torn Nippon. And from this point forward, this story, it appeared in Garo magazine, 1968, which I think is very, very noteworthy because the people who grew up reading comics started to grow up to make the comics. And we are getting a different kind of comic from the people who grew up reading their Tezukas and stuff like this, man. So this is an exercise in the surreal and one of the most successful ways I think I've ever seen in a comic. There's a lot of lip service that Ryan Holmberg gives in the back here. Almost all this stuff has Neji Shiki built into the conversation.
Right.
And okay, yeah. So there's your photos right there.
I was gonna pull as we get to certain ones because he's kind of got them all mashed up on a page there.
Yeah.
But maybe as we get to some specific panels or whatever that are referenced, I'll lean that over.
There's no clear this is why this comic is the most important comic. And we were having the conversation afterwards. Reading this story, I have my own thoughts and ideas, and I do think that it is one of the most successful pieces of surrealism in the comics medium that's ever been done. A big part of that is when you're dealing with surrealistic material, I think people's consciousness really, really does play into the construction of their comics a whole lot. And I think this one does a great job of pushing it all to the background. Like, it feels like it's all a stream of consciousness, automatic comic making. He doesn't have an explanation for the purpose of this comic, what it signifies. He gives you no clues or answers to what it is you're looking at. You got one, Jimmy?
I do, yeah. I actually have two of them. So this guy, you can see clearly being pulled from this photo.
Yeah.
And then this body prone on the ground being pulled from this photo.
Right.
And it's very
that's the page before.
Interesting because like these photos come from all sorts of like photography magazines.
Yes.
It's almost like Morgue Files once again that we've talked about with American comics. The difference possibly being I don't need a reference for this type of car. I may need a reference. I may see a composition that I think is really noteworthy. Like the tracks that he's walking up is another photograph. Pretty clear and really close photo-wise.
I think he directly traces like from projects it or whatever.
Yeah, there's such a combination of things going from like a photorealistic background and not uncommon in manga, but maybe something that he's pushing a little bit further than typical. But when you combine that with the surreal, dreamlike, logic setting, it really is something different.
Yeah, you have pieces like this where the guy running the locomotive has this mask on. I think that this is the closest kind of comic to like a Lynchian kind of filmic surrealism. It's always brought up with Velvet Glove, that's Dan Clow's Lynchian Twin Peaks-ish kind of comic, and Clow's is he's a square dude, you know, like he doesn't go on chemical trips. He's not a drunk or anything like that. So he's pulling from a pretty sort of rigid mindset to make his surrealistic stuff. And it looks like a guy who's like, I'll do this thing here now and I'll do that thing. And probably it's the most tapped into his subconscious that he's ever been, but it still feels, it's too crafted or something like that. This thing, it just feels like a dream, like the way it reads. I think that having a translated piece, like having somebody else put the words in there, adds to the level of surrealism, because it's like, it can't possibly be exactly what Tsuge wants.
Even your use of color is bizarre.
Right.
It feels almost dreamlike in that, you know, you can picture a dream, and again, maybe everybody's dreams are different, but you can picture these dreams where like an element like color or something is associated, or it's kind of like a weird inexplicable part that sticks with you.
Right.
So I think there are a lot of elements that fit together that way. This is the photo reference for your train car here, and you can see like it's really, as you say, possibly traced to get to that level.
Yeah, quite sure.
And speculation that he didn't even draw this page, that this one was another assistant that he worked with.
Yeah, that's the thing, because Tsuge, now the Garo cartoonist, Garo is like Fantagraphics 1995, where like, yeah, you get your book, but you ain't getting paid.
Right.
You're not getting no money, man, because we didn't sell enough for you to get paid. So he was a part of Shigeru Mizuki's studio. This is the guy who does the Kitaro comics. And what's interesting is, like, this is Mizuki style. Like, that looks like Shigeru Mizuki artwork. So he could, like, kind of crib that style. It's super interesting, because I actually didn't know that about him. I always wonder how Garo cartoonists put their, make their bones. And, like, there's that other guy who worked for Go Nagai, Kaze Shinobu, and none of his stuff ever made money. And then we discovered that he stayed working for Go Nagai even while he was like moonlighting and doing his own stuff. So that's a common practice. Now, what's cool about this is it has sort of the setup of a traditional story, where like we have an obstacle that this boy is fucking bleeding out, and we have a need. He needs to get fixed. That is the closest that this gets to a Aristotelian structure. It's not the point.
Right.
So he needs to get fixed, and he's going in town. He's trying to hop a train because nobody can help him in the one town. So he hops that train, and then it just like circles right back to where he began.
Even without tracks.
Right. It's very, very dreamlike. And once again, Tsuge like made it a point to say that like this isn't meant to be a dream or anything like this. This was a revelation seeing it in the artist edition, because the photo is there, and I think they did a thing in the book where they like lay it over top, and it really, I mean, it's one for one. He traces it.
This is the photo reference here,
right?
So you can see how close it is.
I wonder if like part of the exercise is going through your morgue files, pulling out a couple of things and like making a story around that.
Yeah, I wonder, like, for this page, if Holmberg, like, who puts this together, because in a weird way, by having all those photos next to each other, you see how bizarre they are.
Right.
The juxtaposition of these different images and bringing those together in a story, it's very strange all around.
If I, as an artist, like, had to make a guess, it starts here. Like this is the first photo you get, and like, oh my goodness, because this is just too evocative. Like, that's an incredible thing to see.
Yeah, and your mention of David Lynch earlier really makes, like, to me, this is a panel like
right.
that, because I feel like these filmmakers that trade in that, they have to find the elements, find the setting, find the composition that has that kind of power.
Right.
And that's what that photo displays.
Now they're going, this is the Kitaro candy company. And still the guy's bleeding out. Like, the artery, it's disgusting. It's like two slits.
Yes.
When you see this face here, like, there's some mention from Holmberg in the back about yokai, and yokai are like these trickster demons that are in Japan. It's one of those things that I talked to you about, where it's like, no wonder they have such vivid imaginations, and like manga and anime stands up, because like some of the yokai are like, it'll be like legs with a butt, and inside the asshole is an eyeball. There are like these squirrels that have big fucking nut sacks and stuff. Like it's super perverted. It's wild. You know, it's balls and dicks and farts are important. Like all kinds of weird shit. So there's some mention of the yokai in relation to this character. When we get to this, you start to think Maruo a little bit. You know, certainly with that World War II backdrop. A lot of mental problems with Tsuge. His wife did that book called My Picture Diary, and some of the material in there is just about how she has to take care of a depressed fucking artist. And it's like she's raising more than one kid.
You know, the other way I would contextualize this, especially for influence, 1968, you think
Absolutely.
like there's an international changes are going on in
Right.
culture and pop culture and society, but also in comics.
Absolutely.
You have the undergrounds really emerging in Robert Crumb in the States. And I'm not just saying surreal, but really like just a shift in what comics can be and what they can be about.
The grown up.
And you have Mobius, you know, we just watched a documentary on him talking about kind of like pushing against, you know, like reflecting the change in culture and society in the comics that are being made.
Right.
And he's pushing against it in Europe along with a few other artists. So it's interesting to me to think like internationally this kind of like changes are really happening. And I think that's part of what this story and its influence is like right place, right time of like pushing some boundaries that haven't been pushed before in manga.
Absolutely. The right platform. Because this is not the kind of comic that would be in Shonen Jump.
Right.
You know, you need a Garo. And with Garo, you know, Kamui Den being the most popular, like pretty much being Sanpei Shirato's vehicle, it still is like a regular manga in a way. You know, there's chapters and there's like one big long story. And yeah, they will have some avant-garde. But a story where the beginning, middle, and end kind of doesn't matter. You know, the screw style thing is sort of calling attention to like how the nurse, like after he fucks the nurse, she puts like a valve clamp thing on him, and you know that's your nejishiki or whatever it's called. So he gets fixed up after banging the nursemaid and stuff, and then pulls a Don Johnson, Crockett and Tubbs kind of vibe, man. I feel like you should pull the photo out for that one too, man. That's a good photo. Because I wonder if it's Tsuge. Like, here it is, man. 15. Kitai Noboru. Oh, what's cool is it has the dates of these photographs and where they come from, too.
Yeah, I find that part really interesting.
So, yeah. So, there's your photo. Such a wild comic. You know, it's crazy that it's taken so long. Was it also in Comics Underground?
Possibly, I can't verify that.
It's such a famous, probably in manga we've seen like this like is a very very famous,
yes,
iconic image.
Yeah, apparently critical writing on this takes off after it's published, you know,
Right.
which is a big driver of why it's so influential. You know, not just other comics that followed it, but also sort of like comics audiences and art and literary audiences. I mean, this Comics Journal was the first time I encountered this, 2003, 20 years ago, and I remember being completely baffled, like, what the hell is this?
Right.
And quite frankly, it's still a little baffling to me.
As
you know,
it's-
it's strange.
Yeah,
Which, yeah, I think the strangeness is part of its influence. So it still has that effect. Very impressive in that regard. But you need context. You know, like whenever you encounter something like this that's like culturally significant, but almost completely on its own, you know, in 2003 in America, it was such a bizarre reading experience the first time.
yeah, for sure. I think there are two Tsuges.
Yes.
That's the surname, and one of them is definitely in Raw. I don't know if it's our guy here. It's a small Raws, the Pantheon Raws. Volume 2 has a Tsuge, so it was a kid on a bandsaw or something like that.
I feel like that may be the same one. I have another Tsuge somebody else
Okay,
had
here it is.
translated recently. And it's maybe a little more commercial, the other.
Right, yeah, it looks more legit. Yeah, this is Yoshiharu in Volume 2, page 83. Let's take a look. Yeah, here it goes. So this is I got this in 6th grade, so...
Yeah, this would have been probably the first time I saw this artist would have been in this volume.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. I didn't make that connection.
Pretty cool.
Now it makes me wonder if he's also in Comics Underground, maybe a different story of his. So
Right.
yeah, fascinating that the manga that we are getting at this point. And again, man, I say it over and over, Ed, I must be sick of hearing it. But this is the golden age of comics. That
Yes,
we have
sir.
access to this stuff, like volumes of his work now, volumes.
Yeah, big shouts to Ryan Holmberg, who I'm sure if he sees this video is like so critical of everything that we're saying and can't believe it, throwing his pencils and snapping his fucking iPad and all that kind of shit. But hey, dude, we appreciate your service. Thank you so much for doing the translations that you're doing. There's Kataro right there.
Yes.
Presumably that's some Tsuge pages or something. Fantastic that they are producing the bibliography, because like when you go to Nakano Broadway Mall and you're searching for different manga, it is the rare mangaka that gets like the name placard on the bookshelf, and the Tsuge brothers both get theirs. So it's fantastic that that we're finally going to start getting that material. Please support these books so that these publishers can keep making them. And then maybe we could get some Maruo down the line and things, you know, like the American public has to be massaged into, you remember those old days of manga, they had to look like comic issues, it had to be a hyperbolic, like identifiable American type thing. Now we're getting the Tsuge bros, right? In a couple of years, maybe we'll start to get our Maruo bibliographies and you know, some of the more esoteric. Let's get a translation of Kaze Shinobu.
Yes, please. Ed, imagine the kid who is finding this, wants to draw comics, loves comics. He's you when you find Crumb. It's
Right.
like, you know, too young to really process what this is, why it's great, but he's got it. He's heard it's good, so he's reading it, he's internalizing it. I mean, the stuff that people have access to now, it blows my mind what will come out of their pens.
Totally.
Or their styluses, probably. It's more likely. But it's really, it's an amazing thing, man. Is it like books like this, it's where the fan in me kind of like really comes out.
Right.
Because this stuff is just, it's beyond. You know, it's I never could have dreamt of something like this whenever I'm 25.
Can't say it any better, man. You good to go?
Yes.
All right, man, let's do a couple commercials and then I think we got to move. So this next week, I hope to finish the comics drawing part of my Switchblade Shorties, and then I want to. I could probably color 5 pages a day. I think if I so like, you know, another 4 or 5 days. That have to get a cover together because they want to make the announcement in March, and then it comes out October. And you know, I'm so used to that year lead time that I asked the agent and stuff like, is that enough time? And he's like, yeah, that's a season. Like, to have a season jump is good because, like, you know how we have our year with stuff? He says that, like, what, and I've experienced it with all my books, is, like, a ton of pre-order, and then it disincentivizes the stores to have it as, like, sell-through on the racks. Because it's like, they factor, like, okay, well, we'll sell X amount or whatever, and they imagine that they sold all the ones that they're going to sell or something like that. So, he said it's like perfect. Like usually a season is good, and the big publishers, like, they'll build us a season out rather than like a full year. We'll see how it goes, man. More news on that later, Kayfabers. All right, Jimmy, I'll do that quickie joint if you just want to lock or whatever.
Ready?
Yep. Buy our books. Keep the videos coming to you on a regular basis. Jimmy has Street Angel Deadliest Girl Alive, Street Angel Princess of Poverty. He self-published True Crime Funnies, 1986 zine, and the Black and White zine, BW. Get it at his website. He has the Hulk Grand Design, he has the Grand Design Treasury out there, trade paperback coming to you soon. Hip Hop Family Tree Omnibus is an Ed Piskor project. The X-Men Grand Design trade paperback is available to you. You know what? Let me. I just got my sea legs, Jimmy. I'm gonna do that again. Which one do you?
Doesn't matter.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Yep. Buy our books. Keep the videos coming to you on a regular basis. Jimmy has Street Angel Deadliest Girl Alive, Street Angel Princess of Poverty, True Crime Funnies, 1986 zine, BW zine. Get those at his website. Hulk Grand Design, Treasury is out there. Trade paperback coming soon. I have Hip Hop Family Tree Omnibus. X-Men Grand Design Trilogy. Red Room Crypto Killers comes out the end of February. Antisocial Network, Red Room Trigger Warnings, and the Switchblade Shorties comic strip coming to you online on a daily basis. Now that we're done showing off our books, get them, and back to the video. Okay. That's a good page. What's a good page? I'll stick with that one. A couple big images. Get it? Kayfabers, like, follow, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Hit the bell so that we can notify you when new videos are available. We are on the road to 100,000 subscribers. Thank you very much. And if you get anything out of these videos, if you dig what we produce, make sure that you follow the channel, and it helps us out a lot to have a good subscriber base. The videos are ultimately brought to you by the books that we make, but we have a Patreon, and the Patreon is there for you to mitigate the kayfabe effect. Become one of our biggest supporters, and you get all the videos before anybody else. You also have access to the live stream recording session as we produce these videos. Link in the description below for the Patreon. We have more than 1,700 videos out there, and we might have talked about some of your favorite comics. So make sure you hit the magnifying glass on the front page of the Kayfabe YouTube channel. Check out the channel, pop in your favorite titles, check out those episodes. If we haven't talked about your favorite comics, then by all means put something in the comments so that we can push those books a little bit higher on our to-read piles. Ultimately, the videos are brought to you by the books that we make. Right now, I've been working on Switchblade Shorties, which is my daily comic strip. You could find it on all of our social media platforms, the Kayfabe stuff, my own personal social media platforms, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. There is a dedicated Switchblade Shorties Instagram, and it's also on Webtoon in its full archive. The Hip Hop Family Tree Omnibus is going quick, and it is $45 on Amazon at the moment. So scoop it up if you haven't. It's almost freaking half off, so you can't beat that with a stick. Best book I made to date. X-Men Grand Design Trilogy trade paperback. Contains all of my X-Men Grand Design works. It's the one place where you could get it all inside of one handy dandy cover. Red Room Crypto Killers is coming out at the end of February, part of a trilogy of trade paperbacks, but you don't need to start with the first one because each contains 4 self-contained stories. So if you grab this first, Crypto Killers, then at a later time you could read the Antisocial Network or Trigger Warnings. Jimmy, why don't you let the people know what's out there?
I have Street Angel Deadliest Girl Alive and Street Angel Princess of Poverty, both available right now from Image Comics. These are also self-contained totally. One is black and white, one is full color. The Homeless Ninja on a Skateboard, perfect for the action comics or superhero comics fan in your life. The big news for me is the self-published comics, True Crime Funnies, the 1986 zine, and the BW zine, celebrating the 80s black and white explosion. These are self-published. You can get them on my website, jimrugg.com, or my Patreon, patreon.com/jimrugg. They've been out of print and unavailable. They will be back and available March 6th. So if you missed those, March 6th, you can pick those up. And Hulk Grand Design. This is a treasury-sized edition, out of print. However, the trade paperback coming out in May this year, and that is available now for pre-order. So let Marvel know they need to keep these things in print by pre-ordering that one wherever you pre-order books.
The books are the most important way to kind of keep things on the tracks. But there are some direct ways to support Cartoonist Kayfabe. Jimmy, let the people know.
Subscribe to the Cartoonist Kayfabe e-newsletter at the links below this video. You can also pick up Cartoonist Kayfabe t-shirts, merchandise, hats, stickers, and more at our spread shop. That link is also under this video.
There you have it. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, support the channel, keep the vids rocking. Jimmy, give them the final marching orders, and we'll be on our way.
Read more comics.
Excellent. Okay, Kayfabers, man, that's how we do it. got about a half. Might as well set up, get a little nourishment, and then unless there's something on my phone, that came from the Ross team Ross, we should be chatting with the man. Yep, I don't have any negative. What do you call it? Negative text or anything coming in that says, we have to blow you off. Jimmy,
good.
Jimmy, I'm gonna airdrop this stuff to you
Send
real quick.
it over. Oh wait, you know what? I have to
Get off airplane mode.
All right, now send it over.
Yes, sir. 1 second. All right, I guess. Oh shit. I guess I'm going to admin phone 2. That doesn't feel right.
Yeah, there it is.
Okay. Speedy. Oh,
I don't know if I got it. Give me a second. Oh, complete.
okay. How about this good bit, man? Because I was dealing with Mikoi, and he was the editor-in-chief at Avon for the City of Glass and all those projects. Like if you bust out City of
Bob
Glass,
Mikoi.
I bet you Mikoi's name is in.
Get
yeah,
out.
yeah. He commissioned all of that.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
Do you have any anything else to offer besides that?
Yeah. Like there were X number planned. He was there for like 2 or 3 of them, and like the last ones. Oh yeah, Thomas Ott was the next one, the artist.
Yeah, yeah.
And he was like, this motherfucker with the scratch board, like he would almost get a page done, fuck up at the last minute, and throw the whole thing away. Like I said that it would take him like 4 pages to get like 1 page done, kind of thing. Because he would just throw it away. It wasn't like he could put ink and then scratch off the ink. Like it was just done, which sounds like a nightmare. And his work is so meticulous.
There, was it Fantagraphics that published him? Somebody published like 4 books, 5 books of his in the early 2000s, and they were amazing, beautiful stuff.
Yeah.
What was he adapting something?
Yeah, they all were. Yeah.
Do you know what he was adapting?
I forget. I have to ask.
He'd be good with any horror stuff. Probably would have been outstanding.
It's all noir.
Zingarelli was doing the Nightmare Alley, and I think that was ultimately published like a decade later somewhere else. But Spain Rodriguez did a Nightmare Alley also, unconnected to this line. That's pretty phenomenal. It's Spain. I just picked up Subvert Comics number 3 this week, and it has the Trash Man, but it's one long story. It's not the stuff like in that tabloid or from the newspapers. And that's pretty cool. It's very like 2000 AD-esque.
Sure,
because it's set on like this super highway where there's like no law within like 300 feet or 500 feet of this 40-lane super highway, and bikers,
right?
And car
and the way he
gangs.
draws that stuff, dude, with like all the extra sprockets.
It's wild. Yeah, that stuff is fun to look at.
Yeah, he's cool, man. He's cool. But how crazy that Mikoi's a part of that.
Yeah, it's a small world. It kind of makes sense in a weird way. It makes sense why he would get into like repping cartoonists like pretty much before anybody else I can think of. He had like, it seemed like he really hopped up on that corner quick.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's finally like I had him work on WYSIWYG, and then that all shit the bed and stuff. And he's like, dude, after 20 years we could do some work. I'm like, well, it's been 15, but
yeah, that's pretty.
And
good.
the deal he put together was pretty fucking cool too, man. With like, I think of it as like gamifying the thing where it's like you hit a certain level and then it unlocks this next level, and then if that's the case. If that next level gets unlocked, then it's like, all right, I'm going to draw some more of that. And if not, then the public ain't looking for it. But he said that, like, the way that, when you're fucking with the New York guys, even this shit that, like, gets remaindered or whatever, like, they're still selling it, and it is not unheard of for books within the mainstream, I mean, to like, grow their legs in 10 years after they come out. So it's interesting. It's pretty cool. It'll be fun to see how that game is played.
Jabba Man, I thought I had those Subvert comics also. So like, it's.
Yeah, I need to see
I
the
see
cover. I might have it.
so many comics that, like I just don't remember anymore. Like, did I take that home? Was it in my house?
Guys, it is getting crazy. Like
Did I have it and get rid of it 20 years ago? like
look at
it's
what,
tough.
Look at what this shit's turned into, and then like I have another 12 boxes that I'm gonna put to the side there to just like free up space in the back room.
I feel like we've had several weeks where I'm like, oh, let's do this comic, and then it's like, oh, you know what? I don't have that. I thought I
Right.
did. I had it at one point.
Yeah, the interesting thing, unless you went and rebought Lady Death like the week after, like you didn't have it.
I
but then
did.
you
I did buy that.
Yeah, okay.
I found it at this little convention right by my house. Somebody was selling a big box of romance comics, make an offer, so I gave them everything in my wallet,
Right.
which is like $56 or some odd amount. And then on my way out, I found the Lady Death miniseries for $5. Went to my car and pulled out change. Came back because everything was cash. It was a bunch of cash only stuff.
Guys, we're gonna split. We got to be kind of quick.
Yeah, man. Take care, guys. Have a great weekend. Thank you as always.